Hello and welcome to the Board of Supervisor meeting. Today we're going to start off with the interview. Chair Blundy, would you like to take over?
Sure. Can we please bring our would-be volunteer into the meeting? Oh, there she is. Good evening. Hi. Thank you so much for putting in your resume to be a part of our ad hoc committee on township properties. Really appreciate that and really appreciate getting a chance to actually speak with you. Your little microphone says you're on mute. Are you actually on mute? Or
I am not now.
There we go. Excellent. So could you just tell us a little bit about why you're interested in being a part of this process?
Well, I have an interest because I'm the coordinator for AOI Arts Center, and I've seen how the farm has been used for the past 7 years, being that coordinator. And I have an interest in, I have some art interests in pursuing some of those buildings and seeing their viability return. So that was number one. But then when I got the list of qualifications, I kind of had a lot of qualifications. I have an environmental background. I have an administrative background, and have been active in the community at various points in my 40 years here. So, I have the summer open, so I thought, what the heck,
Well,
I was on the solid waste committee way back in, like, I don't know, the mid 80s or something like that when it happened too. So
that's perfect. I would want to point out, right, because there are some people who think that this committee is just about the farm and the buildings on the farm. It's not. It's more than that, right? People are always surprised. I'm surprised about the various properties that we own. And obviously the committee can't look at everything because we have, a short time frame, but there will be other asks, not only about, understanding prioritization and future use and finances and stuff like that. So I say great. Thank you so much for raising your hand again. And I open it up to any other supervisors who may have questions. Look at this. It's like Fred.
I'm just happy that that is willing to step up. Her qualifications are excellent for this position, and I know she has a love of the township, and her commitment to volunteerism is unquestioned. So I would welcome her as a member of this committee.
It's all your fault, Fred, anyway.
Dan?
Sure.
Hi, Dan.
Well, good evening. How are you doing?
All right.
Nice job, by the way, setting up the Frenchman's going to mispronounce this, the artist en plein air.
Oh, thank you.
They did some great work around the township.
Did you get to see the show?
Only the pictures online. I didn't get a chance to go.
They are more magnificent in person. Sorry you missed it.
Me too. Again, thank you for stepping up to the plate here to express an interest in the committee and to help the township. I'm curious to Suzanne's point, just generally, without getting into too much detail, what you might have for initial thoughts on some of the, obviously, Patterson Farm pretty well in the AOI, what I'll call the AOI area buildings. I'm curious what you might have for thoughts just generally, or at least your thought process, at least on other facilities and other properties and how you look at it.
I'll just speak to the donut hole that is the AOI portion. Satterthwaite, I can't speak to. I have not been in those buildings, but I've been in and out of the pack house. The main barn is terribly pitted right now because of the gophers. I'm not sure if stuff in there had been cleaned out or not, but the two garages are pretty good. But the pack house is a nice cinder block frame house, and we would love to get a pottery center established in there. It requires utilities. It requires you know, both water and sewer and electric to get in there. But it's a very viable building. Anything about the asbestos or lead paint can be painted over or enclosed. So it's a wonderful building. I think it has a lot of potential to allow us to expand beyond the 2D into 3D with some workshops in there. You know, the aspirations for barns, and I'm just echoing some things that people have said, is for some sort of performing arts programs or something. I'm not quite sure. I have not been actually in the barn because it's been a problem with the footings. And the Satterthwaite barn, I think it's in pretty good shape. Y'all are using it for public works, so I think that's in better shape. But you know, and I think another aspiration, since the Satterthwaite property may or may not be renovated, but if it is, there's an opportunity for retail operations full-time there for art. We're right off in 95. It would be wonderful. I don't know if you've ever been to either South Carolina or on the Blue Ridge in North Carolina, and it says North Carolina Artisan Center. And it's like, oh gosh, that would be really nice to have a Bucks County Artisan Center there. But those are aspirations. Those are my initial thoughts from an arts perspective. You know, some artists have also been interested in the garage that is on the right-hand side, not the one that Colleen and artists AOI use right now on the left-hand side. But, you know, we can do an artist in residence up there because you've got an upper studio, and the lower part could be used for demonstrations as well. Artist in residence, sculpture, all kinds of stuff. Again, it requires utilities, and that's a big expense, I know. So just some initial thoughts.
I appreciate that. So,
Sure.
thank you.
James, John, any other questions?
No, not at this point, Betty. Nice meeting you. Thank you for
Hi.
putting your name in the hat. I appreciate that. I'm sure everybody does.
Sounds like I can't take my name out of the hat either. So thank you. I appreciate your kind words, everybody.
And that actually leads me to my first question, which is, if we have another solid waste committee, can I count on you for being a part of that?
Oh my God. I was on the initial committee that said, let's do recycling. I think I did that in high school, you know, in Central Jersey, and we started a recycling committee. So I go way back with those kinds of things. And then we decided that by the time we got done with the committee, John, it was, okay, we don't need to have separate streams and separate colored buckets. We need to have a unified stream and one big bucket. And that's what turned out, because the technology was there for them to do separation at their end. So
The other question I would have, and it's, have you thought at all about the Slack House that's on Makefield Highlands at all? No, okay, and that's fine. And I'm sure you probably haven't toured it. It's interesting. It's one of those properties, if I think about the hierarchy of ones, it's up there as like 2 or 3 in my mind of ones that we have to think about what a strategy would be.
Is that not being used? I thought they were using that for weddings and things.
Not really. No, it's still kind of closed down. They were using the first floor a little bit for some stuff, but very light, if anything. And there's some issues with asbestos there too, and some other stuff that make it a little harder to deal with. But
That's too bad. But again, it's just a matter of figuring out what's there and what you have to do. And I know you guys, did you do engineering reports on all the properties, or do you have an inventory yet?
Yes.
so we have
Thank
an
you.
inventory, yeah. So that we've received, yes.
Okay.
And there was a more detailed engineering report that was done originally on the Satterthwaite house a while ago. So, but yes, we've gone through that part.
Mm-hmm.
I think the harder and the bigger challenge for the committee, aside from prioritizing resources, which is a big component, which is finding an adaptive use or use that will yield value to the community and to the property, so that it's not something that's fixed up but not in use, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a kind of a unique sort of challenge that's a function of what is missing. And certainly there's a lot of people have different ideas, much like the wedding idea for the Slack House, or using it as a place that you could stay overnight or something, or thinking about how you would, if you were going to sell art within the Satterthwaite House, that's certainly an option too, or retail. Those are some, and that's where I think the group will have some significant kind of discussion around suggestions. And that's all I have for questions. If you want to.
Okay, well, if you have any questions for us or else, thank you so much. You will be hearing from us shortly, I assume. And,
So you think this is going to be ready to jump in and get some work done over the summer then?
that is my greatest hope, right? We can't let time keep marching by without coming up with some kind of plan. And I like the way you talk about aspirational, right? We can dream big, and then we can put boots to the ground to start moving, maybe at a slower pace.
Till you run the
dream.
numbers, it ain't going to work. So is there a community process around any of this?
I'm not sure that I understand what you mean by that.
Surveys, community input after the committee evaluates. What's the process around getting?
So I mean, the initial piece is recommendations, and how that all comes together is somewhat within your scope. Certainly, our neighbors and friends and residents are not shy of speaking up, and they may be a great source for information. Your point about balancing, prioritizing, and the finances, obviously those are the big drivers. So
right.
People might want a giant bounce house. I'm sure someone does, but we probably don't have the money for a giant bounce house. So that's really where we're looking to leverage, and one of the reasons why we try to ask this committee or think about what the different backgrounds people on this ad hoc committee would have, so that we could really stay focused on those competing and important interests.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne. Nice to see you in person, sort of.
Nice. Yes. as person as we've been.
That's
nice
right.
to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Betty.
Bye.
Okay, Suzanne, we'll get started with the meeting.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Monica.
Okay, it's official. It's 7:39. We're starting the official Board of Supervisor meeting today. If you'd like to dial in for public comment, you can call 646-558-8656 and enter meeting ID 230-936-1902, followed by the hash or pound sign. Today, if you're following on social media, please note that there's a little bit of a delay. So if there's something on the agenda that you would like to speak on, please call in a little bit early. And I'm going to pass the meeting to Suzanne.
Thank you so much. Welcome, and I call this meeting officially to order. And with that, I would ask that you join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. And with that, we'll call the roll. Fred, are you here?
I think I am. Thank you.
James?
I'm here as well.
Dan?
Yeah, I'm enjoying the nice, comfortable chair at the township building today. It's been a while.
Woohoo. I thought you were there last week. And John?
Yes, I'm here as well. The chair's okay.
All right. Excellent.
I was in
Thank
the
you
small
both
conference room last week at the old chairs. This is definitely an upgrade.
Oh, okay. Look at this. We have a new gentleman with us tonight. Are you going to try to play the role of Andy?
I'm going to give it my best here. Owen Hine with Remington Vernick Engineers.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay. Just a reminder to everyone that public comment on specific agenda items will be taken at the time that the agenda item is discussed. And Monica, how do people unmute themselves? Star 6.
Star 6.
So, and we might add that to the agenda for next time, because I know that always proves to be a challenge. So with that, we're on to agenda item number 14 with a COVID-19 update. Kurt, any update for us?
Sure. The township building did open on Tuesday. So we have staff that will be masked when they're serving the public. We do have a mask requirement to enter the building for the time being. Smooth. We have everybody back in the building working safely. Monica, do you have anything you want to add? I think you had indicated you wanted to talk about some stuff at the pool.
Yes, I do have some good news. We've been monitoring the numbers at the pool, and we have noted that we had reduced our capacity at the beginning of the season to 1,000. We have never even come close to 1,000 people, even on the hottest day. So I think that indicates to us that we can just expand to normal capacity. And in addition to that, we're going to start allowing guests, so 5 guests per member. And if you are reserving the pavilion, which we will also be opening, you can have up to 20 guests. So really looking forward to starting that. So tomorrow we'll be ready to go. And that's really my COVID update for today.
Thank you. I think that's great news. Thank you for sharing it and for all the work that you do.
Suzanne, can I ask a COVID question? Very
Sure.
quick. There you are, Kurt. Kurt, I know we're moving obviously ahead with the township building. The pool is opening way up, which is good. Are we? I think we are, but I just want to make sure. Are we fully open at Makefield Highlands as well now?
Yes, I think there's still some restrictions inside. I'd have to speak with Mike, but yeah, they've been no limitations as far as golfers and coming out, what have you.
I want to try the menu, so I was curious as to where they're at with the restaurant. That's all.
Suzanne, I'm sorry, since Dan triggered something. I mean, if you don't mind. So this past Monday, I did put application in, and it was approved for the township's rescue plan money, which is about $3.5 million. As I had reported at the last meeting, it's not just there for us to pick and choose what we want to do. It's quite limited in scope. We do have the ability to reimburse ourselves for the next 4 years for actual losses that we had on revenue from 19 and 20, and through a series of compounded formulas, future potential losses on a number of factors that I won't bore you all with. As far as capital projects go, that money is not, unfortunately, like we can't use it for roads and bridges, which would be ideal, probably what everyone would really like to see us plow infrastructure money into. But we do have the ability to use it, for example, for stormwater, for basins, for that sort of work, which we know there's a lot of stuff coming. The rules and regulations for the use of that money are not out yet. So we will have to patiently wait until there's guidance, so we make sure that we don't make an innocent error with how we bid projects out or what guidance we have to use. I'm expecting that we'll have half of that money, about $1.7 million, in the next 30 days or so. The second half of that money will come a year from now. We will earmark that money into an entirely new and separate fund that you will all see, that sits all by itself with that title on the fund, just like we have for any other fund in the township, for everyone to see. And when we get that, I'll let you know, and you'll be able to see that fund subsequent to that in an upcoming treasurer's report, and obviously in next year's budget. That's all I have.
And Kurt, along with
Thank
that,
you. Sorry, John.
I was going to ask
one
if,
second. John, could you just wait 1 second, please?
Sure.
Kurt, I just really want to thank you. I know that was a bit of a Herculean effort to get that paperwork in a short time frame. So thank you for securing the township's position with that. And I look forward to, the next steps. So with that, John, go ahead. What would you like to say?
So I was going to ask, is related to that, losses incurred on the township-owned golf course would be eligible for use of that money then? Correct or incorrect?
I'll give context. Losses, if there were losses that could be shown in excess of what the, so we, as we know, we've had shortfalls in the past. Just saying we had a shortfall, I would have to prove that the shortfall was in excess of what we had seen in previous years. So it's just as a partial comparison, they haven't defined specifically what revenue they will count to be examined, although they have suggested recreation or entertainment as one of them. But a more specific example for 20 would be loss of pool revenue, right? We closed the pool. We can show what we had trended for 3 years before that to make that example. We would have to do a similar effort with a golf course. And if it showed that, you know, expenses notwithstanding and shortfalls notwithstanding, that it was more profound or pronounced than in previous years, we could work to recoup some of that money.
Excellent.
Anybody else have any questions? Monica, is there any public comment? Oh, I'm sorry, James, were you going to say something?
Yeah, Kurt, I just had a question as far as that goes. I know that, you know, we're struggling at the pool from a staffing standpoint. You know, being able to get even lifeguards to come in. Obviously the pay rate that we have for lifeguards right now is below what, you know, they're paying for somebody to push carts at a local supermarket. Is there anything that we can do to leverage some of that money to maybe entice to hire some more lifeguards or help with staffing at the pool to be able to get that back, you know, to where it was? I know it's probably just going to be a 1 year type situation until maybe we reevaluate, you know, the pool as a whole, but would that be an appropriate use of those funds?
Good question. And I asked that question and I got a shrug from people from the Department of the Treasury. Generally, what they're telling you is you can reimburse yourself for expenses, for example, and it's the only clear-cut example I could give. If you gave someone premium pay. So for example, when you think of like people who worked at a grocery store in the midst of the pandemic, that they gave a bump in pay as premium pay, that is how they define what you're eligible to reimburse yourself for. In the midst now to boost pay, you know, sort of at the conclusion or however far we are in this pandemic, I would say it's likely not, but they have not said a definitive no to that. And part of the struggle is because this money was so quick to get out, they only gave preliminary guidance and no rules or anything with that. So we're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place in the interim time period as we wait to hopefully get some of these things defined out so we can use it properly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought process is from a competitive standpoint, the reason that they are offering $15 at Wawa's with signing bonus and that sort of thing is because stimulus money is paying people to stay home essentially, and they're trying to entice people to come back out into the workflow, which is a direct, you know, effect of the pandemic to begin with.
Agreed. And I think it's certainly one of the topics we would be pursuing with them. The only thing I'd be hesitant to do that with the expectation that we could, and then to be told it would not be eligible. So hopefully ICMA and some groups I'm in have been facilitating meetings with Treasury officials. I know that like Senator Sanasario has been working to get access to state officials to try to give some of this guidance. They just don't have it yet. So we'll see.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Dan.
Anyone else? Monica, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Okay, well with that, then it's your turn again, Monica. We're on agenda item number 5, community announcements.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. As a reminder, during this portion of the agenda, residents and youth organizations may call in to make special announcement, or you can contact the township at admin@lmt.org to request a special announcement be added to the agenda. Next, Parks and Recreation, digital and in-person recreation opportunities like sunset yoga, goat yoga, art, Zumba, and more are now available. Information can be found at our website that is on the agenda, or if you go to lmt.org. The pool is open. You can still register today. Please go to the website. You can click the link on the agenda or go to lmt.org to register. Plans for Community Day are in the works for August 28th, 2021. Locals, vendors, and clubs and organizations and businesses interested in participating, please contact the Parks and Recreation Department at kathyh@lmt.org. And that's all I have today, Suzanne.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Dan, I see you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Sure. Two quick shout outs, actually. First one is congratulations to Kaylee Williams, a Lower Makefield resident who just graduated from Pennsbury High School. She won the PIAA Class 3A state championships in the 100-meter hurdles. Nice job. She's also an honor student.
She played field hockey.
I was about to say that. She's also an honor student and all-league field hockey player, according to the information that I got. So I knew you were going to like that, Suzanne. Obviously, you did. And she will, as they say, she will be taking her talents to Georgia State University in Atlanta in the fall. So nice job, Kaylee. And I wish you were going to my alma mater to improve their track team as a former track athlete. But I wish the best to you. And the other one, Monica, this is more for you. I think it was last weekend or the weekend before was the food truck festival at Memorial Park.
Yes.
Incredibly well attended. It was a very warm, if not hot day. I forgot about it, to be honest with you, and I went for a run. That's my normal loop, and I went and I saw the place was packed, so I did a loop to check it out, and it was very well attended, very well organized. There was a line of cars. I don't know how far it backed up out of the park, but it was very popular. So I did not partake in any of the festivities, unfortunately, because I probably would not have been able to make it home, but it looked very nice. So job well done. Thanks for putting that together.
Thank you, Dan.
That's all I have.
Suzanne, might I add one that I forgot? I apologize.
Sure.
We do have, new this year, we're going to do a 5K color run at Macclesfield Park August 1st. It's going to raise money for the ADA transition plan. We're very excited about it. We did make it accessible. So if you don't want to be sprayed with color, we're going to have an outside loop so you can access that too. And we're really looking forward to it. Registration will go live tomorrow. So very excited about that.
Great. Something came into my mind and went out. Oh, I remember. Everybody should know that although not officially affiliated with Lower Makefield Township, the Lower Makefield Township Farmers Market is open, and tomorrow they're going to have all sorts of reptiles and creatures for people to meet. So every Thursday over at Charlin Farm. So hope to see you there.
Suzanne, I get one for you too. I recall you usually announce the soccer tournament. I believe the PAA softball tournament is coming up very soon, where we're going to have lots of high-level softball players coming to the township to pretty high-level tournament. Lots of college coaches coming to recruit. So sometime in the next few weekends, you'll be seeing some folks around our softball fields. But feel free to
this weekend, Dan.
Is it this weekend?
Yep, it's this weekend.
I thought that was the case. I didn't have it in front of me. So
yeah.
This weekend you could. If you like softball, you get a chance to see some pretty high level softball in the township. Go check it out.
Excellent. Monica, anybody on public comment?
There is no public comment.
Okay, so then with that, we're on to agenda item number 6, consider approval of the minutes from June 2nd, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Dan. Any discussion? Monica, any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Data, call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Agenda item number 7. Fred, we have the treasurer's report.
Yes, make a motion to approve the May interfund transfers of $642,082.61.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay,
I'll
any
second.
discussion?
No.
I think Fred moved,
Okay.
James second.
No, I think, yes.
Are we good? Fred, did you make a motion?
I thought it is.
Yeah, okay, Fred moved, James second. Any discussion? Any public comment?
There is no public comment.
And with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye, raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Fred, you have a second motion?
I do. I make a motion to approve the warrant list dated June 16th in the amount of $585,535.09.
And those are the warrants for May 31st and June 14th, correct?
Yes.
So is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, James. Any discussion? Monica, any public comment?
There is no public comment.
That I call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. Item number 8, Fieldstone / Harris track presentation. Kurt, I believe we have some participants.
Right.
Oh, Mr. Murphy, welcome.
Hi, great to be back, I think.
Of course.
So if you'd like me to get started, Suzanne, I'm happy to do so. I'm here tonight with both Larry Dugan of JP Orleans and Kirk Mante. You'll see him on the screen. Kirk is the executive director of the Green Trust Alliance, and some of you have had the chance to be introduced previously to Kirk via the staff introductions that were made over the last several months. And the point of appearing this evening is to present in a more formal fashion to the board the proposal that was discussed pre-COVID regarding the future ownership, maintenance, and development of the unpermitted landfill, which is located in the center rear of the Harris tract on Edgewood Road. As I think everybody is familiar, the Harris family has owned that property for about 70 years, between 1932 and 2002, when it was acquired by the Quaker Group, who has owned it consistently since then. Harris family farmed it in the 40s and 50s and up until the 60s. It was used as both a gravel and borrow pit, and over time during that same period became a community disposal area / unpermitted landfill. In 1965, DEP effectively shut it down, and it has remained in that condition essentially unchanged since then. So for the last 55 years or so, it's been dormant. However, there's been lots of testing done from 65 through the recent past, like 5-6 years ago. There's been north of 90 different test pits and samples taken from the site. And as I think everybody is aware, most recently, Orleans, who has an agreement of sale to acquire the property, has proposed a 32-unit residential development plan. And while we've talked at length about that configuration, a lot of the conversation has been focused on the future of the landfill area, which is about 11 acres. Jim Majewski, who I see, I think has the ability to share the screen and can show everyone a plan that highlights both the residential component as well as the 11-acre landfill. The proposal for the landfill involves securing Act 2 approval from DEP to remediate it, which effectively means in this case that an approximate 2 foot of cover would be placed on the bulk of the 11 acres. There is a portion of that 11-acre landfill that abuts Brock Creek that what trash and other building and landscape and household materials would be removed and the area reclaimed. But that would be the portion of that 11 acres where it would be actually removed. And I want to say it's about 100 feet adjacent to Brock Creek. The balance of the landfill area that Jim has depicted on the screen and his cursor is outlining would be the subject of the 2 foot cap. In a prior board discussion, you challenged the idea of, as would be typically the case, that the open space, in this case would be the area of the landfill, would be owned and maintained in perpetuity by a homeowners association. And the board challenged that assumption, suggesting that they didn't, or many of the board members didn't feel comfortable knowing what the financial security of that arrangement would be, and whether or not an HOA would have the interest and commitment, as well as the financial resources to maintain that landfill area in the future, notwithstanding that it would have been remediated. So the challenge was to identify an alternate solution, if there was one, that would provide greater assurance to the township that the landfill area, even as remediated, wouldn't become a burden on the township at some point in the future if the homeowners simply said, we give up, we don't want to bother with it anymore. So Orleans has gone out, and we've interviewed and met with multiple different organizations that expressed interest in participating in the effort to own and maintain it and redevelop it after it had been remediated. And the Green Trust Alliance, which I believe, based on materials we've previously shared with the board, you now know something about, is an entity represented tonight by Kirk Mantei, who is desirous of taking title to the area after it's been remediated, and then maintaining it as a, and Kirk can explain it, as a grassland meadow or other type of bird and wildlife habitat, that it would be owned by GTA, it would be maintained by GTA in perpetuity, and the endowment requested by GTA of Orleans in order to accomplish that is going to be provided by Orleans to GTA to assure that it would be financially stable and secure going forward. So it would not be owned or maintained by the HOA in this case. There may be other reasons unrelated to the landfill area for an HOA to be created for detention basin maintenance in the typical scenario, but not the landfill. So Kirk is here as I see him, and perhaps with that introduction, if the board would permit, Kirk can talk a little bit more beyond what I've offered as a summary. With the idea tonight would be to share this information more widely with the board members and the community so that we can pursue that option, assuming that it is one that the board thinks has merit going forward. Kirk?
Sure. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for having us tonight. Appreciate the opportunity. I work for and run day to day the Green Trust Alliance, and we're a regional land trust that deals sometimes with complex holdings like this. We own and operate things like mitigation banks. We've done land transfers with the Defense Department of, old bomb dumps and stuff like that. So we're very, we have a over 20-year history from North Carolina to Massachusetts of, working with landowners that are really trying to balance kind of what the community needs, what the local government needs, and really to balance and eliminate to the extent possible any other kind of third parties kind of long-term liability for whatever may happen. So in fact, working with sites like this is a big part of our business model. We take care of land that's endowed forever, and in some cases have to report it back to the EPA every year. We love to not do that, but sometimes that's what's required. And the one thing I'd like to say, and I'm happy to open this up for questions from anybody, is that when we evaluated this small piece of land, which probably seems if you're trying to look at it from my perspective, may seem like a very random piece of real estate for an organization to be interested in. And especially in its current state, from our perspective, we won't be inheriting a dump, right? There's no way that Green Trust Alliance or any other nonprofit would take ownership of this area until the state and DEP and all of their experts and all their attorneys believe that it's thoroughly been dealt with. And so up until that point, we have no liability, no cost, no nothing. And once we do take possession of it, it's something we do want to take care of as wildlife habitat, as green space, as making sure it's never, used as a dump again, and all those kind of things. So, we do have, I'm a biologist by background and a lifelong bird hunter and all of those things. And I want you all to know that we certainly take this sincerely, and it is an opportunity for us. And, we will make a little bit of revenue on it. We make a very small amount of kind of net revenue on long-term stewardship of property like this. And how we do it is by having a lot of them. It's like having I would say in some ways it's like having a long-term mowing contract on 100 different apartment complexes. One of them, sure, it's $4,000 a year, and what does that mean? But the business model is to have a lot of those, and so that's kind of what we do. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure Ed is as well. So I know you guys have looked at a lot of material about this property, and its dispensation is important to you. So anything I can answer, I'm happy to.
Kurt, unmute
That's
yourself.
my job. That's my job, Ed.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Kirk, just for context for the board, since we've spoken, my question has to do with if you were to own this and there was an issue where someone dumped garbage on the site, there was the fence that you'd have on the site was broke, or something that required a crew to come out. Do you have people relatively local that something wouldn't languish for weeks on end before it got dealt with?
We do. Yeah, we've got two crews just on the other side of the state border in Jersey. And I think as we settle into this, when GTA acquires this piece of property, we could potentially look at having somebody closer or within the county. Honestly, if I'm being totally transparent, which usually serves me well, I'm not a great liar. So we would like to do a lot of business in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of environmental work coming to, not so much where you guys are, but in York County, Adams County, and Lancaster, in those areas. And to the extent that we can show that we're good local stewards and that we are building track records in Pennsylvania communities is good for us. So we, in fact, have like a pretty detailed budgeting system to create kind of how we think these endowments would work, how often we think a site like this would be likely to experience illegal dumping or ATV traffic, or all the things that we all know happen with land. And so our job is to, first of all, is to have a presence there on a fairly regular basis, and then to make sure that we funded the remediation of those problems. So that's, we think, I've got a 24-year experience of doing exactly this, and I've done about 300 of these transactions. So I think we've got it down pretty good. You never, a meteor could hit or whatever else we haven't dealt with before. But chicken trucks explode and all kinds of weird things happen. But I think we've adequately adjusted our expectations of what the problems are likely to be, and I think that the funding that JP Orleans has proposed after the Act 2 cleanup is complete is going to protect this property for the benefit of the community, which happens to be for our financial benefit too. It'll help us not lose money on it, for sure.
Kirk, day one, assuming we move ahead and you take title to the property after it's remediated and the Act 2 clearances are provided, what does GTA do to ready the property for its future use as you would envision it? Explain to everybody what's going to happen. I assume it's not going to just remain inert and there's a 2-foot of clean fill cap put on the site. What happens after that?
So part of the Act 2 closeout on that fill will be probably a turf, some type of turf mix or something. And really one of the necessities to have a real long-term steward, and maybe to the point of some of the members on the call right now, to not have the homeowners association necessarily responsible for it, is you want to make sure that trees don't grow and put down roots below the cap and disturb the cap. In this case, since I think the cap is of highly preventative, above and beyond what is probably required to clean up the site kind of deal, but it's still the regulation is that trees must not grow on the site. So that's when as a conservation organization, what we look at. Again, we're not in the business of not making any money ever. We are interested in, grants through state programs and through federal programs as well to do things like, wildflower mixes out there to manage it as the turf is what's called a cool season grass. We would probably shift it to warm season grasses. Number one, the community is probably likely to be a little happier with the wildflowers and stuff. And it's also that makes it well tuned to be mowed by us, once every fall. We come through, hit it once with tractors, and that's it really for the year, aside from, cleaning up dumps and cleaning up, fence, issues and that kind of stuff. So, we really would like to see it as a community amenity, not just because it's the right thing to do, which it is, but I think that we can monetize that as well. I think that's a good thing for us to be doing. We do it on a lot of our properties that we acquire, and why wouldn't we?
What type of security would be installed around the perimeter of the area that would segregate it from the homeowners that would be surrounding it, the new homes that would surround it?
I think what the last that we've discussed, and I think there's an indirect discussion, I think, with the local planning staff, with JP Orleans and with GTA, we'd be likely to look for fencing that is similar to other fencing in the neighborhood around stormwater facilities and that kind of stuff. So I would assume a split rail kind of setup. We certainly want it to be effective, but we want it to be attractive. We don't want landowners to take it down because it's ugly. Split rail is ironically, is probably the least likely to be vandalized of any type of fence, other than chain link, which nobody wants to see. So, we think it's something like a 3-foot, a split rail will be pretty effective in deterring, certainly the problematic types of trespass out there, namely dumping and ATVs especially.
And I don't think they're done yet. And if they are,
I thought you had asked for questions from us.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
yeah.
Now, look, I mean, we're happy to answer questions. I'm not sure what else we can anticipate, but happy to answer whatever comes up.
Okay, because I do have some just very general, and I'm sorry if they're like way out of left field, but my preference would not be a cap, but would be a cleanup. But I get that,
Right, that's been asked and answered many times, and we understand the board's position in that respect. Right.
You don't get fresh yet, Ed. You have plenty of time to get, that way.
I get it.
Yeah, but with that being said, when I hear Kirk with a K talking, as I visualize the property, are we talking about like perhaps having a path from the development that anybody could walk on and approach this beautiful split rail fence and look at the lovely birds and wildflowers because otherwise it's kind of a landlocked situation, which, you know, I love wildflowers and that would have benefits to the community, even if it couldn't be seen. But I was just trying to appreciate that idea and what that would actually look like.
I think the answer to that question, Suzanne, is yes. I think the idea would be to create an opportunity for residents, not just those that live there, but from the backside to access it as well, to see what you just said, yes. But I don't think the intention is to permit anyone to walk through it, in it, but around it, yes, but not in it. Correct, Kirk?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I mean, I would honestly think that, you know, as somebody that works with existing and older communities all the time, and these, you know, where there's already a development and there's still the landfill in place, then we do this type of work. I would think that it'll probably be a dynamic conversation with the homeowners association for a lot of years. You know, they probably will have changing ideas and thoughts about, you know, their level of access. And I think, you know, of course, we're going to want to discuss it. You know, we discuss, you know, what the trade-offs are between access and liability and all those other kind of things. And I mean, we'd be good stewards to enter into those conversations, you know.
And would you also be open to, you know, I don't know, bird houses or bat houses or whatever else is the current thinking that would attract natural wildlife to that area?
Of course, that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
All right, well, I'm done for now. I know Dan is chomping at the bit, so let's let him ask his questions and then I'll open it up to the other supervisors.
Thank you. There's Kirk in the middle there. How you doing?
Doing well,
So,
thanks.
I don't think we've met before, but I know a lot of people that you've worked with in the past.
Okay.
So I'm aware and familiar. You know, one of the issues Suzanne just mentioned is that the preference for the board would be to clean up the site rather than just capping it and leaving stuff in place. I think the estimate prior, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, was somewhere in the range of 6 or 7 million for cleanup. I'm sure
Yeah, I think that was true a few years ago, Dan. I think that number has grown, as has the number to cap it. That has grown considerably since the earlier estimates as well. I think you're right. The magnitude of the difference is, I think the complete cleanup, as you described it, is probably 8 or 9 million now, and the capping is probably approaching 2 million, plus or minus. And I see Larry Dugan. I don't know if he has been able to hang on or not, but I think those are the relative numbers that I think Larry most recently spoke about.
Ed, you're in the ballpark there.
Dan, the quote from before that we had was from a couple of years ago, was 7.7 million to execute that site.
Yeah, I was just doing that from memory, but I had the 7
You're right,
in my head.
Dan. Yeah.
Better memory than I thought, I guess. And part of so this site was I forget what year it was done, but the site was subdivided to allow for this to happen. Subsequent
2018, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 or 4 years ago, Dave, maybe before my time, but I think it was around that era.
And part of the reason, and this is one that was a little uncomfortable for me, to be honest, in that part of the reason, our understanding anyway, that it was subdivided was because there was some direction from the DEP to do that as part of the Act 2 program. But subsequent to that, Mr. Trulove, Mr. Lewis, and I met with the DEP and their Act 2 folks, and they stated that they never made that a requirement or recommendation to move forward. So that one leaves me a little uneasy about some of this.
Well, I'll come back to that when you're ready, Dan, if you want me to comment on that. But if
Sure.
you want to move ahead and then we'll come back to that, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll go through a list of questions,
Just
and then we can
remind
come
me
back
to
to that.
comment when we get to that point.
Sure. Now, one of the things we talked about a couple of years back when we started talking about what the next steps could be, we had a concern about insurance to maintain the site in case of anything happens. And we had batted around some ideas on what types of insurance coverages that should be required, et cetera. And Dave could probably opine on that much better than I could. But generally speaking, have you considered what type of insurance you would carry for this? And if so, what would be your limits and other information like that we could consider?
Well, Kirk can talk about GTA, and if Larry's on, I think Larry can comment about the investigation he made previously about that question, Dan, from a couple of years back.
Okay.
Kirk, what type of insurance does GTA maintain?
Sure. Our portfolio of insurance is a handful because we work in 9 states with employees all over, and board of directors that spans I think 4 states. So we got insurance, and I'm sure you guys you deal with that locally as well. So it's like it feels like we have insurance for insurance sometimes. But I'll say that as an organization that does these types of transactions on a fairly regular basis, we have standard. I guess I'll work through it. We've got a couple $1 million. I think it's 2.5 million aggregate in liability per incident, which I think may include the umbrella policy as well. Directors and officers are insured, employees are insured for $1 million each. This is and part of this is we work on a lot of federal projects, and so these become requirements, as you're well aware. Every time the township gets federal funds, you're like, oh, this is fantastic, and oh, now we have to do this other thing. So generally speaking, we're fairly covered. Most importantly for this project, we believe that that a properly, moderately conservatively invested endowment for the maintenance and monitoring of this, will grow and will be sustaining and will kind of take care of any reasonable needs that occur, foreseeable needs that occur on the site, forever is really the goal. As far as other stuff that's out of left field, Larry probably should, he's probably looked at more of this from more angles and probably should speak to the site specifically about products or whatever.
But
Yes.
ultimately, you'll be owning or having ownership of the site, correct? Once all
That's
said and
correct.
done?
Yep.
So it would be on your shoulders versus Larry's once it would be in the what I'll call the O&M phase. Would that be? Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's what our lawyers are spending time with too, to make sure that our board of directors, we're a board-run 501c3 public charity land trust, so we are trying to make sure that we're not putting our organization at some type of undue risk either, because it wouldn't make any sense for us to, if we thought that there was a greater risk that we could absorb, it would then cause the organization to dissolve before the risk went elsewhere. And that's, I can assure you that's not how we manage the organization. And that's we're pretty comfortable with the level of risk that will exist post Act 2. We have a lot of faith in PODEP to take this to a granular level, maybe much to Ed and Larry's frustration. But that kind of helps us too. It helps us make sure that what we're getting is a good piece of property that's safe, that's healthy, that's could be a good resource for the community.
And let's remember, as I know we've talked about briefly in the past, and I know Larry wants to comment on something else, but when we get the Act 2 clearance, the township will be named, as will GTA, as a beneficiary of that. So
right.
There won't be exposure for the township or GTA prospectively once the site has been remediated. So
thanks, Ed. That's right. Yeah.
And Larry, I think you were going to talk about insurance.
No, I was going to add that, Ed, that, as part of the Act 2 process, we had committed to having the township and GTA as named parties on the Act 2, so they would be protected pursuant to the Act 2 cleanup standards.
Right.
Okay. And then Kirk, you talked about setting up an endowment, moderately invested, I think was your phrase, I understand that one, to basically maintain the site in perpetuity.
Right.
What is that endowment?
So it's funny. We calculated it on our own using a rubric that the Nature Conservancy came up with about 6 years ago for dealing with mitigation lands, which are a little different, but not terribly. And the number that we came up with was I think $100,000 and $700. And when I talked to JP Orleans and said, hey, this is, we would want to invest this amount. What do you think? Because we always, like any other type of business, you get all kinds of reactions when you list a price. And he said that actually their calculation was about $700 less than that, at about 100,000 even. So, we're comfortable with that. I'd be very transparent in this meeting if we had run those calculations and thought it was 3 times that, and I would let you know. But again, I think go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I'm clear what you're explaining. So are they essentially cutting the GTA a check for just over $100,000, and you'll invest that at, I don't know, 2-3% return per year, and you'll use that 2 or 3% return to mow and maintain a little bit every year?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the long-term average applies, and after the bank takes their piece, it should be between whatever 2.7 and 3.6 or whatever. Yeah, so I mean the 100-year average after banker fees is about 3%. So you're exactly right. That's about what that's the cheap and quick way to calculate what these things cost. And so we think to get out there and deal with trash or whatever other issues at X intervals, that it wouldn't happen every year, but every 3 years or those kind of things, plus the annual mowing, puts us in a positive place from a cash flow perspective. It should pay its own bills forever.
And I'm not trying to be rude at all. I swear, but you can do all that for $2,500 a year, you think?
Well, that's the trick of annualizing some things that are not annual, right? So hope that I would say there's a tiny bit of risk we take in year 1 when the principal was first invested, if we have a $5,000 cleanup or something, that would be tough, right? But as the fund is stabilized and years go by and we spend $800 one year, we spend $1,100 one year, so it can actually work quite well if year 1 it goes off fairly well. So you're right. From a mathematical standpoint, there's a bit of a tipping point right at the beginning where we do need that principal to grow just a smidge in year 1 to get us off the ground. That's right.
But Kurt and Dan, remember also, I think you said, Kurt, the endowment was run through like the Nature Conservancy endowment calculator, so to speak.
That's
and
right.
Secondarily, that's an endowment. We've also provided that the homeowners association will pay a yearly or quarterly assessment to GTA for the continued maintenance. So there will be additional funds through the payment of homeowners dues to GTA for the maintenance and ownership of this parcel.
That's good. That's good information, Larry. Any rough estimate on what that is?
Here's what I remember, Dan, and I'm doing this by memory. I think, we had capital contribution when the unit was sold, when a home was sold, was $500 that went to GTA. And then it was going to be a portion of the quarterly assessment, which was yet to be determined.
Okay. That's helpful, Larry. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk, I know at least reading up on what your group does and who you've worked with, I know your partners actually very well. It looks like most of your projects, at least the ones that are published, are wetland mitigation sites that what the typical process with wetland mitigation sites is developer impacts something, they have to do a wetland mitigation, they hire a company to do that. I know you team with Green Vest a bunch. I know those folks.
Okay.
Princeton Hydro is typically the engineer, and
right.
then a 501c3 has to take over ownership of the mitigation site to manage it in perpetuity. That's written in a lot of state regulations.
Yep.
How many? Correct me if I misspeak at all, please. But I'm wondering how many I'll say contaminated sites or dirty sites has your group had over the years? And of those, how many of them have been in Pennsylvania and Act 2 sites specifically?
Great question. This is our first land acquisition in Pennsylvania, so we technically have not done an Act 2 before. And all of our, I'm trying to separate mentally from past jobs I've had. We're working on a federal nuclear Superfund site right now in Maryland, and it's been cleaned up. It's been monitored for 10 years. We're trying to get the U.S. Department of Agriculture to fill in the hole so we can plant the cap. But they're having trouble doing federal government stuff. So we got a big pile of dirt next to and it's where the USDA used to put nuclear testing materials where they would zap corn with, plutonium or whatever to see what would happen. And then they just put it in the ground, and now it's been cleaned, so it's a similar, and we are funded, we help do the cleanup, and we are funded to take the easement, and our funder for the easement very much, Department of Energy very much wants us to close this effort out. But we can't. And so it's a matter of patience. It's a matter of dealing with folks like Ed and Larry and make sure that we're getting them what they need, but also that, the government is doing, especially the feds are doing the things that they need to do. So, this is the first, I had a acquisition very much like this when I worked for Ducks Unlimited in Frederick, Maryland, actually. It was a pesticide dump on the side of a farm. So, took a lot of years and it got done, and it was great in the end. But this process was identical. A lot of people had a lot of concerns. Everybody wants to know where the liability goes, and I would hopefully suggest, not with any naivety, that this is one of those stories where the liability goes away. We have the opportunity to do it, to safely contain the stuff on this site, which is very minor in nature, and preserve a nice piece of little habitat and make it into something for the community. I think it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah. How did you guys all get together? Did Princeton Hydro introduce you to the team
They
here,
did.
I assume?
They did. Yeah.
I figured as much.
Good guess.
Yeah, well, I know them well too. They're locals.
Yes.
Kind of digging in a little bit, no pun intended. I think Suzanne's line of questioning is what got me to think about this stuff in terms of how we would see this as a community amenity.
Blame me, Dan.
What's that?
Don't blame me.
No. These were good questions. You got me thinking. From the standpoint of making a community amenity to making sure it's secure but nice at the same time, right? That's a balancing act. We know that.
It is. Sure, yeah.
And depending on the type of contamination or where it is, sometimes we have to working on, let's say, $3,000 a year to keep it nice is not always that simple in an area like this. When I say area like this, I mean a property like this where, it's a perfect area for invasive species to grow quickly because it's just what it is. It's edge habitat, essentially, wide open.
That's right.
So maintaining it in that way. So there's the issue of trying to get something native to grow that does allow for birds and wildlife, et cetera, to come in, and at the same time balancing the tricky part about some of these wetland mitigation sites, especially when you do them up in New Jersey where everything's contaminated in the Meadowlands or something, is we actually have to be careful about what we plant so we don't attract too many birds or other wildlife, because the contaminants bioaccumulate in the wildlife that eat
Oh, sure.
that eat this stuff. So like, I'll give you a local example. If I saw on Facebook some folks telling us to plant mustard plants at Patterson Farm in the lead contaminated areas because wildlife would love to eat it. That's actually a terrible idea because you'd actually kill the wildlife and anything in the food chain above that would eat that because the lead would bioaccumulate. So I don't know that we have that issue here, but could you kind of wax poetic a little bit about how you would foresee, and this is my last question, I swear, how
Okay.
you would foresee,
Not true.
you're, I'm sure Ed will say something that'll get me to ask a question, but how you foresee just the day-to-day ish management during the year, what you think it'll look like, how you foresee that happening. You know, we have to balance keeping folks out of it because we don't want them to damage the cap with making potentially a nice visual amenity at some point. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that because that's interesting.
I think that, that always is a little bit of an evolving process with any piece of land. I do agree. Certainly the two offenders we'll be looking out for in terms of vegetation will be Phragmites and reed canary grass, right? And now you're right that if we were to not do our job and let them kind of take over, really there's no harm to the cap and there's no harm to the safety of the site, but it doesn't become that landowner resource, right? And so the trick with those, and this is true for, almost every, easement or property we acquire, is to identify those things relatively quickly, which you can only do until drones get better. At least you can only do by visiting the site and seeing it and saying there's Phragmites over there. When I'm back here again in a month, we've got to spray it real quick or send an intern out to pull it up or whatever else, and not letting it become, it's in some ways that this invasive stuff is like managing a garden. It's like, how long do you want to let the problems go? They typically don't go away, right? Whether it's tomato worms or whatever it is, reed canary grass in this, wetland, marginal wetlands next to a railroad, in Eastern PA are always going to show up with frag and reed canary. So that's certainly going to be a focus. And that'll drive kind of what type of stuff we plant, frankly, because it'll have to be aggressive. It'll have to outcompete a little bit of that stuff. So, but it also has to be within the confines of the 2-foot cap. So it's going to be an interesting experiment. Yeah.
And Ed, you were correct. You said something that maybe, sorry. There is one feature. Yeah, I know. There's one feature on the site that does concern me with respect to because of the limited funds that you do have to work with on an annual basis. And what concerns me is there is a stream and I believe a culvert there along the edge, and there's thanks, Jim.
And the culvert's going to be replaced, Dan.
I understand that.
Okay.
My concern is long term. We're in a very highly developed area, right? And by area I mean the township versus just this micro area. So the watershed creates lots of incised channels. Streams take on more water than they naturally would, et cetera, because of impervious surface and everything else. So there's a tendency to have washouts in area over time. The culvert's going to be replaced, so it has a lifespan. So what do we do, and where's your agreement lie in case there's flooding in the area, stuff gets washed out, and a cap has to be repaired, or something has to be done with respect to this stream area? Because I think that's probably the riskiest. Anyone correct me if I'm wrong here. It's probably the riskiest area that you have in terms of potential cost to fix something down the road.
Yeah, and to Dan's point, I was going to circle back, Dan, because I didn't think Kirk answered one of your earlier questions, and I want him to circle back on too. But one of the things that as a layperson I know the DEP is going to require is obviously annual or biannual monitoring for scouring and things like that, correct? So that once the cap is in place and GTA assumes ownership and maintenance, they will have to be out, and I assume more often in the early years, Kirk, than going forward, to make sure that scouring, be they from flooding or however it happens, is addressed promptly, right?
Yep.
And to Dan's question about other improvements, granted the culvert's going to be replaced assuming 2022 or 2023, that will have a longer useful life, but I'm sure in part of your capital improvement program, you'll have to contemplate repair or replacement of that over time, right? Kirk?
Oh, yeah, certainly. So this, anytime, so I've been doing wetland and stream restoration, especially on protected lands for many, many years now. And so this is one of those things that is, again, certainly we don't want problems to develop and worsen. But these are opportunities. If I can show a funder at the state or anywhere else that we've got, 200 feet of stream that can be restored for the credit of PennDOT or whoever else, and permanently protected under an existing conservation easement, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, terribly challenging to get funding for that stuff. Because frequently one of the big issues is finding cooperative landowners in Pennsylvania. So it's not something that I think we're overly concerned about. We do budget. In fact, there's a culvert replacement in our budget, and I think it's at 30 years or something. So that's part of the $3,000 a year. And again, the idea behind doing one before we acquire it, at the cost of JP Orleans, is that, in year one, when GTA acquires the property, we wouldn't need to do another culvert replacement. We'll allow that fund to continue to annualize that piece of it, until the normal lifespan of the culvert kind of gives way.
One other question that Dan asked you, Kirk, and I don't think you answered, or at least I didn't hear it, was how many different properties or easements does GTA own? And I know you indicated this might be the first in PA, but in terms of New Jersey, which is the closest, you've told us previously that, your portfolio is pretty broad, but in terms of what you're responsible either for ownership or maintenance of, easements or fee title, how many properties are there?
We have, I think, 3 in some status of being completed right now, but I think at the moment it's 24. Our goal in the next couple of years is to get to 100. 5 years ago we had 4. So, we're trying to build several of these, and they range in size. We have them as small as about 3 acres. We have one that's about 1,500 acres. So it really, it really depends what the opportunity is. And this is one where, where it's relatively close to everywhere else the GTA works. It's in a geography where GTA wants to be more active. And again, we're real close to our partners, Greenvest and Princeton Hydro, who, if we couldn't find somebody local in a pinch to do the maintenance or to do a stream repair or whatever, those guys can be there in an hour. So, I'm not, we feel pretty, this is a lucky kind of situation for us in which we didn't have one of those things to say no to, because it was terribly, we didn't feel like, if it was 6 hours away from us and our partners who we work with, we would have told Larry and Ed that, it wasn't an opportunity for us. But, we feel like we can be good stewards of it. We've never had a substantial easement violation in any of our other sites. Never had other than, failing to meet some, native plant cover requirements and mitigation and stuff. We've never had a mitigation violation. We've never had anybody, challenge an easement legally, so I like to think we're pretty thorough at what we do. We've got, I'm a biologist, so I'm smart enough to know that I need smarter attorneys and accountants. And so we definitely pride ourselves on having those folks handy.
Dan, I know you've said it and you're not incorrect, but I think it bears repeating what Larry said. In addition to the the 100,000 endowment by Orleans, we're still going to have the one-time contribution from the homeowners to contribute to that, plus the annual assessment going forward on a yearly basis. So it's more than just the interest on that 100 that's going to be available. And I think that'll add up pretty quickly. That should provide a pretty big margin for error for whatever Kirk's analysis is providing in terms of annual costs for maintenance and monitoring and et cetera. So.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Can I go back, Dan, to answer the first question or comment you made about the relationship that we have with DEP and what was said or wasn't said about the subdivision? So we're clear, and I have talked to Larry and others about it, that when they met with DEP, the advice they got from DEP was that unless the landfill was a separate tax parcel from the balance of the site, any future homeowner of any building lot or home that bought in that subdivision was going to have a deed disclosure saying that property was part of a landfill. And so the recommendation of DEP was, guys, if you want to avoid the obligation of having a deed disclosure in future homeowner deeds, you are going to have to separate out the landfill as a separate parcel from the balance of the site. So that was the motivation for doing that. It wasn't that DEP issued a fiat that says thou shalt separate the landfill, but it had to do with the obligation for deed disclosure for prospective future homeowners.
Ed, you got it mostly right. And you know, I was involved in these conversations, so I remember this specifically because there was a give and take between Mark Kaplan, who was our attorney at that time, and one of the former board members. It wasn't that DEP required it. When you start the remediation process, as I understand it, you have to give a notice of intent to remediate. So if it's all one tax parcel number, right, that all of those homes would be burdened with a notice of intent to remediate. So we would then have to explain to every homeowner that that notice of intent to remediate did not include their property. It included the unpermitted landfill. So on the advice of our council, we did a minor subdivision so that the notice of intent to remediate would only be on lot 2 and not on the homes on lot 1. That's how that came about.
I appreciate it. I don't think that's necessarily how it was presented to the board at the time or how we understood it, but I understand what the DEP would be describing to you. I just don't.
That, in my world, Dan, and in yours, I think, and Dave's, the whole issue of deed disclosure is a big deal because it has a dramatic impact on the marketability and saleability of homes. If you're having to have a deed disclosure in your deed, you have future homeowners saying, what is that and what does that mean? So it is a significant issue in our world and how we manage that. So
and that being said, we fully intend to disclose all of this to the homeowners through a public offering statement. We're not trying to hide anything.
Right.
We will disclose all of this. We have done it previously in other communities. So, you know, we will have full disclosure of what's transpiring on lot 2.
Right.
And just to follow up on that, I would assume that would include, since a portion of the HOA would go to fund this, that messaging would happen in the HOA too, that there would be documentation as to why a portion of the fee was going so that people would at least be on notice or have the ability to be on notice if they read things that they are buying a home next to a landfill.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah.
And as you require, Suzanne, all our HOA docs would have to be reviewed and approved by Dave's office. So there will be a level of scrutiny that along those lines that would have to occur. But you're correct. That would be obligated at our end to provide. Yes.
And it's in my interest as well as the township to have that disclosure.
So does any other supervisor have any questions? I mean, this is a discussion item. It's not the last time, you know, if this moves forward, we'll be hearing from people. So, but it is good to try to get things vetted and so that we can understand what the appetite is for moving forward.
I have a quick question, Suzanne.
Yes, go ahead, James. I think Dan and John might be frozen.
You mentioned the capital contribution fund. I think you said $500 per home. How many homes were you talking? I think you said 30 some, was it?
It's 32 homes.
Okay. And will there be additional capital contributions during resales?
There will be, yes. It says our deal with Green Trust, I'm trying to pull it up as we speak. Upon the sale and resale of a home, buyers will make a capital contribution of $1,000 to be dedicated to that. And then they will have monthly or yearly assessments from each home on lot 1 for the ongoing ownership, maintenance, and operation of lot 2. So there'll be a twofold capital contribution, James.
Is it 500 or 1,000? I'm sorry.
It's 1,000. I'm sorry. It is 1,000.
Oh, so it's 32,000 initially with another 2,500. So I think, Dan, that question about having enough in the fund, I think up front is closer to it's closer to 35,000. Is that right?
32 plus 100, so it's a 132 in year 1. So.
And that also applies to resales. So, to the extent there's resales in the community, they would also make a capital contribution of $1,000.
Got you. Okay.
Plus the annual or quarterly assessments, some portion of which would be devoted to that.
Okay. That was the only question I had. Thanks.
I see Mr. Lewis's hand up, Suzanne. I don't know. He doesn't look frozen to me, right?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Ed, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, and
So John is frozen from where I sit, and so is Dan. So go ahead, John.
you can hear me, Ed?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So, and again, you're coming into this, the previous lawyer was the one who made their representations with the EP, so I'm not holding that with you per se. So a couple of questions for—
Go ahead, blame me. I get blamed for everything else.
When the remediation's complete, Greenway the GTA would assume ownership of the property, right? So they would own the property. And so they're the owner. And if, for example, 5-10 years from now, there's a potential new liability associated that's environmentally related, they're on the hook for that, right?
Well, Larry may know more about that than I do. I think only, John, your scenario might be accurate if that the newly arisen situation 10 years from now was disclosed but not acted upon. But I don't, if it was entirely unexpected, I'm not sure that's correct. I think the township and GTA would be covered by the Act 2 clearance. Larry, is that accurate or not?
The town, as I understand the Act 2 process, and not an environmental attorney, is that, you have an Act 2 report, and that Act 2 report includes all of the investigations that have been taking place, and that you are then protected for let's say, the contaminants set forth in those investigations. So if there's a contaminant that wasn't set forth in the 90 test pits and I don't know how many water samples that were taken on this property, it may not be covered. And that's the way you are right now. Nothing's covered. There's liability out there right now. The Act 2 provides you with a form of protection from liability because we have remediated the site.
So along those lines then, is there any sort of like pollution legal liability, like an environmental insurance policy for, any of the risks post cleanup? Because policies may change, things may come about that, that weren't necessarily known at the time, related to the cleanup. Is there any insurance along those lines?
There's insurance in the environmental area that we are exploring, but that insurance is for a limited term. It's not perpetual. It's like any other insurance. It has to be renewed over a period of time.
Mhm.
So there's nothing that provides an absolute guarantee or an environmental insurance here.
But is it possible though that we could require environmental insurance for this?
Require anything for the site here.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked the question is my concern on contingent liability, in that you'd mentioned that the top off went from 1.2 to 2 million, and a full cleanup was 7 million, right? That's rather high inflation. And if 10 years from now there's a problem and it needs to get mitigated, that's a contingent liability that if the landowner is unable to meet, would then fall on other folks. And we want to make sure that that's not falling on the township or other folks. We want to make sure that that risk is fully resolved and mitigated, which is why it's nice that you have, like, say, $2 million of per incident event insurance, but we're talking about an event insurance-wise that could be $10+ million, depending on what the circumstances are. And I know, and I'm not, this isn't an area where I'm active in. I know that that's a lot of money that would dwarf what you have in endowment and some other stuff. And my hope is that we don't have that situation 10 years from now, which is why I asked about, specific environmental insurance that would cover those kinds of risks, so that you at the Green Trust Alliance wouldn't have to worry about it. The township wouldn't have to worry about it. It would be fully resolved and protected against. Now, insurance isn't perfect, as we're learning with some stuff that we deal with, but it can help reduce the risk. And that's a concern. It's why I wondered why that wasn't explored, or is that something you would consider or have considered?
John, we'll consider it. But again, I would say to you, insurance is not perfect. It's for a term. And so it's not perpetual. And the fact of the matter is that, this landfill has existed in its current state, unremediated, for 20 years. And, the prospect of remediation, to me, and I'm biased because I'm a developer, I admit that, is a better prospect or better legacy that you have remediated it instead of letting it sit there idly by. We would explore insurance, but it won't be perpetual. And it's, there's exclusions, and I'm sure Suzanne and other members of the board know that it's full of exclusions. So it's something we would explore, but I'm not saying it's a guarantee, and it wouldn't provide any guarantee or assurance that something that would be covered 20 years from now, or an incident 20 years from now, would be covered under that policy.
Fully appreciate that, and I'm sure that there are ways in which we could ask for auto or renewals of insurance, because a 10-year term obviously is not perpetual, and maybe we'd only ask for it for 20 or 30-year period. But those are the kinds of things that we want to reduce the contingent liability to the township. And the Greenway, and by the way, I'd like to thank Kurt for, I know you did briefings for supervisors. You also sent along your financials. And between 2017 and 2018, you had a rather precipitous drop in revenue. And the question, and I want you to be going concerned should this work for you. What happened there, and what have you done to right the ship, so to speak, from that time period?
That's a great question. That really is timing of kind of milestone payments on major contracts, especially with the Defense Department, that kind of stuff. So a lot of those thankfully are paid in advance, but they're only paid partially. So we may be, we may get paid in 2017 for the next 2 years worth of work, which will look like no revenue and just a loss in the next year. So we've got, and certainly the last, 12 months or 14 months has been another one of those where we're waiting on, I think, 36 million in contracts right now that are, previously approved projects, and just waiting for stuff to come through. So, so that's one thing. The other thing is that the projects that we do, especially if we're participating in the cleanup aspect of it, the the budgets the projects have a life cycle, and so do the budgets. Most of the capital is spent, in the first 50% of the, 5 to 10 to 15 year lifespan of these jobs. And as the jobs drag on, even though we may be spending money on them, we're not pulling in, a significant amount of cash. So we got a lot of jobs in, from really 2018 to 2020 that were in the third, fourth, fifth, seventh year of their life, and trying to bring on new large scale jobs with the feds and with other clients. So that's, there is a cyclical nature to this for sure. And the fact of the matter for us is that we don't do a lot of work with land developers. We mostly are doing federal work. So it's, trying to, like all of us, trying to manage the priorities of one federal administration to the next is, especially the last three is quite a bull ride,
Yeah, no, and along those lines, it seems like, so if the majority of the work you're doing is for the federal government, when you're done that process, you're not the end landowner, are you? Or is the agency still the landowner in that case?
Usually the feds, in the case of the feds, in case of energy and interior and defense, they want us to be an easement holder and not the property owner. And part of that reason is they want a third party steward, who is separate from the landowner. And the other thing is they know that it makes it easier if they themselves want to acquire, fee simple that land. It makes it easier if it's not a conservation organization. They can, if they want to buy it for their own purposes later on, I think they find it a little easier to deal with, the army of federal attorneys with, mom and pop, as opposed to, when I see them coming, I pump the brakes and get all the attorneys in the room, right?
So that's actually good if the majority of your holdings are such that the federal government's sort of the backstop if something were to go wrong on those.
Right.
But still, I look at this and I'm like, I kind of have to assess you like a credit risk of a bank. Is this somebody I can loan money to because there's going to be this kind of a risk? And if you're telling me that the other contingent liabilities you have are less because they're with the federal government, that's a positive when reviewing this.
True.
But in general, I'm deeply concerned still about that contingent liability. I know you cannot erase it. I can respect minimizing it in a constructive manner. I do certainly see the benefit of remediation over just leaving things the way they are. But that being said, when I look at the model here, this is still could be a very profitable project for the developer and still be a winner. I just want to make sure that win is not at the expense of a future liability of the township and the residents. So that's my concern, because I know you're still working through this. I wanted to provide, genuine feedback of kind of where I'm at and the things that I would look at in reviewing this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's all I have.
I think Suzanne had to log back in. She texted me she was having some issues. So I guess, Ed, if there's not questions from other board members, I'd ask you, obviously there's a project. This isn't cleanup. There's another part of this that has to do with, which Larry had mentioned, 32 houses. And I guess the point of this meeting is to, before you went down the path of really engaging professionals and consultants to get the temperature of the board for the project itself, for moving forward, before you did so. I mean, I think that's the purpose that you're here.
Yeah, and
what you want to talk about with that.
Well, right, and I guess it's, it's the tail wagging the dog or the other way around. We had spent a fair amount of time with the staff and Jim and Planning Commission looking at the configuration of the homes that would surround the landfill. And I think we got to the point where, in terms of lot size to match the homes across the street, access points on Edgewood, and other type of typical subdivision review stuff, we had pretty much gotten through that. But the big elephant in the room was what to do, the future of the landfill, ownership and maintenance. So the subdivision part of it itself has sort of taken a back seat to everything else. But I think, unless Jim disagrees, Jim Majewski, I think we had pretty much resolved most of the other design issues dealing with the plant itself, so that this was the last big issue. And you're right, until we get some consensus about the landfill remediation and approach, I don't think anybody's prepared to move forward on the other aspect. So, because that's the big threshold question we got to get beyond.
I guess, obviously the question for the board is whether it's not putting them on the spot tonight or in a subsequent meeting.
Right.
Want to give insights about, like, listen, they're comfortable or not comfortable going down this path, whether there's unanswered questions or not.
Right.
So it's
and that's why we wanted the opportunity to present it publicly and have people think about it and hopefully answer questions. And if people need more time to think about it, so be it. But we're anxious to try to get to a point where somebody, all of us, hopefully make a decision that makes sense to move forward or not. But I mean, I think this is the real issue.
Okay. Then is it fair at an appropriate time to move to see if there's any public comment? Monica?
There is no public comment.
Okay. Well, then I thank you, Ed, Larry, and Kirk, for coming tonight. Certainly is some things to think about, even though I'm not getting what I want, Ed. We'll see you in the future, right? You don't quote the Stones.
Yep, I'm sure we'll communicate with Kurt and Jim, and I assume you'll give further feedback to them, and we'll circle back as appropriate. Thanks for everybody's time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Kurt. Thanks.
Be well.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, guys.
Okay, well, we were hop skipping along, and now we're just moving on to agenda item 9, which is the engineer's report. So, Owen?
All right, thank you. We submitted a written report. In addition, I want to give an update on the road program for the township. So Harris Blacktopping is working on the project. They've completed ADA ramps, inlet repairs, milling of the roads is all completed. Right now they're working on the pavement overlay of Black Rock Road, Effingham Road, and Shelley Lane. Westover Drive neighborhood will be paved this week. And then Trend and Friar Drive neighborhoods will be paved next week. Bid alternates of Silo Road, Inverness Drive, and James Court will be paved afterwards. And just also of note, there'll be temporary striping, but when the final striping goes in, there will be reflective markers to help delineate the lanes, things like that. So.
We call that the Blundy provision.
Thank you, Owen.
It's important for safety.
Yep. So I think also there was some update that you were going to give us on consider anything about the bike path reconstruction program?
I don't have an
Or is
update.
that parcel of the same? Okay.
That's right. I don't have an update for that right now.
So then
If I
is
may,
there?
Suzanne, I did see that they did pave the section in front of McCaffrey's on the other side of the road today. So it looked really nice, and I know they're working on it pretty good. So
I'm sure that'll make Lee happy. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, he hasn't called me yet to go for that bike ride. I'm sad about that. No, just
He's stuck
the
on the other
engineers.
side of 95.
Yeah, it looks like they'll be done within the week from today. So that means they should hopefully will be ready to use fairly soon. So in case people are looking out for that.
Okay.
Owen, did you
So
have a pay request? Make us.
I do. So for the road program, we are recommending payment certificate number 1 to Harris Blacktopping. Our inspectors have verified quantities completed, and so we submit that recommendation for payment tonight.
So moved.
And can you tell us the dollar amount? Owen, do you
Certainly.
have that?
The dollar amount is $79,083.81.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who was the motion maker? I know John seconded it. Fred, thank you. Okay. Any discussion?
Owen, do you know
Yes,
how much is left? I know we're looking to pay the first portion. I'm wondering how much is left in total?
Over 600,000.
Okay. So what is the 81,000 cover? Just initial milling? Okay.
That's correct. It probably includes the ADA ramps, the inlets, the milling, things like that that have been completed.
Okay. I ask Andy the same question every time.
I'll pass it on.
Yes, he does. Any other supervisors? And Monica, I'm going to bet we had some public comment.
That is the truth. Lee is on the line and for public comment.
Lee, when you have a moment, please state your full name and address for the record.
Can't we just refer to the last meeting?
Or the meeting before?
Yeah, Lee Pedowitz, 247 Truman Way in Yardley. Yeah, I've seen that they've done work across the road from McCaffrey's, but once you know it, I don't bike that way anymore because of the beating that my butt was taking. So I've got another one. I don't know if this is on the road repaving program or not. If you go down Candace Lane, there's a street, Stewart Way, which, if you want to shrink your rear end, you just ride your bike over it. That really needs repaving. It's really in a sorry state of repair. And then if you go into Yardley Hunt, Clark Drive, near the intersection of Revere, that whole Clark Drive is a mess. And I've seen that they've painted it. They've made some markings, I think, for milling. I don't know if they're going to do that or if you're going to do the whole road. And I was looking at the Lower Makefield newsletter or news magazine that came out, and it lists all these streets. Are they going to be paved in their entirety or just sections? And the last comment is the bike path in front of 301 Oxford Valley Road. I know Jim, last year he had some of it repaved, but that whole thing needs to be replaced. I'm not going to make the butt joke again, but it's a good exercise for your rear end. So I was just wondering if anything could be done about those parts of the township.
Lee, if I could perhaps help you with your buttocks issue, I highly recommend that you consider there's special anti-chafing butt cream that you can use.
Okay, let's keep it appropriate for public viewing, and
right. That you can buy in any bike store, including the Firehouse Cycles in downtown Yardley Borough, that you may want to consider.
I tried it.
Thank you. And Kurt, I think Kurt has some information that he'd like to share.
The markings he's talking about, Clark, we're doing in-house. We will certainly make note of the streets that Lee mentioned. As we know, we put out a 3-year paving program that we can be modified, obviously can be changed, that we will continue to evaluate, both Andy and Greg. But the one he's mentioning on Clark that's marked out that we'll be doing in-house fairly soon.
Okay, and I think I can speak for all the supervisors, Lee, that, we would love to do more paving. Certainly years of lack of paving by prior boards for fiscal reasons or whatever have put us behind the 8 ball, and we're looking for creative ways to improve upon that. So,
okay.
Thank you, Lee.
I appreciate it, and I just wanted to mention those. So thank you. You'll hear from me again.
Oh, look forward to it. Thank you, Lee. Monica, anybody else on the line?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, then, thank you for the engineer's report, and we will move along to item 10. Any project updates, Kurt?
Do we vote on that?
Soon I'll be.
I'm sorry. Oh, whoopsie. Okay.
We
Sorry.
do need to
Thank you
vote
for
on
that.
it, correct?
Yes, we do. So we had the public comment, and now I will call a question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Dave, for that redirect.
Audit
I
plan can
appreciate
speak. Let me say.
And now we'll move along to project updates.
I'm hoping next week that I'll be able to provide for you very soon project timing for Sandy Run. We will still obviously be working around having that project wrapped up before school starts. In the event that, and I'm not, I just want to put this out there, I'm not suggesting that this would be the case. As we all know, and you all have seen all the various iterations of this project, the part of the project that is most intrusive for traffic is all the concrete work that's going to happen, the islands that are going to go in, the pork chop that's going to go to prevent the left turn in and out. In the event that the paving is not done by the time school starts, that is much less problematic in terms of managing traffic, buses, what have you. So I'm not saying I believe that's going to happen, but the initial work of all the concrete, getting in the roundabouts themselves will be what allows Sandy Run to be reopened. But we will certainly push to have the asphalt work completed as well before school starts. Unless there's questions, I don't have any other project updates unless there's some questions.
Kurt,
ahead,
very
Dan.
quickly on Sandy Run, what's our kickoff date? We've historically said mid-ish June, and the only reason I'm asking is because that softball tournament that's going to be in that area starting this weekend. That's a high traffic area. I just want to make sure there's no issues.
It will not be by this weekend. So I don't have an actual start date yet, but what we've communicated with Andy and Remington Vernon, because we have several consultants collaborating on this, is that we want an advanced day that we can get the word out to the public on social media, to the police, the signboard out indicating there's going to be, at least to start, delays, and then would inevitably will have to be some detours, that we give plenty of time for that, but it will not be this weekend. My guess would be, if you were to make me provide a guess, would be a couple of weeks away before that first date starts.
Okay, thanks.
Monica, any public comment?
There is no public comment. I thought I was unmuted. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're having the same issue. All right, well then we'll move on to agenda item number 11 and the manager's report.
So if you could, Monica, do you want to come in for this one?
Coming in. Would you like me just to take over from here, Kurt?
Yes, thank you.
So I'm coming to the board today to ask to develop a steering committee for the Parks and Recreation Needs Assessment and Master Plan. We're looking to get about 7 to 9 residents together who would help with the needs assessment, help heavily with the needs assessment and all of the work that it entails. And I ran this by the park board. The park board is in favor and does also recommend the group. And today I'm asking for your support in that effort. This group would report to you. So it's a steering committee that would report to the Board of Supervisors along the way with the results and such as we develop the master plan.
So can we have a motion so we can entertain any discussion on this issue? So I am having some internet issues, but is anyone going to make a motion so that we can discuss Monica's request? Thank you, Fred. Is there a second? I'll second it. And with that, I open the floor to discussion on Monica's request. Any discussion from supervisors?
Hey, Suzanne, it's James. So I just had a quick question. I know that we're struggling filling other committees in the township. And I know that we're inundated with committees in the township. Is it the right time to try to put something else together like this, or is it something that maybe we can wait on? I don't know what the answer is. I just know that from the other committee that we're trying to get people into, and I think we've only had 4, maybe 5 people. Is it something that are we going to ask other committee members that are already committed to other committees to jump in. It seems like there's a lot of cross committee people at this point. So that's just my feedback on it.
So James, I've thought a lot about that, and there's actually quite a few people that I'd like to ask to participate that don't usually participate in some of the other committees. There are people who have given me feedback or requested certain things, amenities in the park, who I'd like to include in the decision-making process and include in the needs assessment process. So I don't know that it's impossible, but I'm hoping that these people that have made some heavy requests in the parks area can get involved that aren't necessarily involved now.
And I'm comfortable with that, but if they could just come to you with that, I'm not necessarily sure if the format of a steering committee directly to the Board of Supervisors is something that's necessary. I mean, that's just how, again, that's just one opinion. I don't know how the other supervisors feel about it.
Go ahead, Dan.
Sure. James, we're thinking the same way, I think. You know, we have a lot of committees. A lot of committees are. The committee idea is a nice concept, right? We want to involve our community members and get their ideas on all kinds of different things. We have a lot of committees in Lower Makefield often for good reason, but we've also discussed reducing the number of committees for the same reason, because we're having trouble filling some of the committees, both existing that have been long-standing, and then you know, we do have some new ad hoc committees that for good reason to try and focus similarly on things. You know, whenever we put a committee together, we're also thoughtful about who's on it, and the board interviews those committee members, and we want to make sure that, you know, a number of things. We like to ask them questions, make sure they're qualified, and you know, their thought processes as to what they would look for, and et cetera, and as you saw from some of our questions earlier this evening. You know, we also have a park and rec board where they have lots of ideas on this that's already established. We also have, I believe we still have our special events committee that has also offers opinions and ideas on similar, if not the same, not always the same issues. I would be more comfortable at this point probably keeping it in the park and rec boards I don't know, in there, keeping it on the park and rec board and the special events committee to kind of guide that and ask for, you know, if they want to do community surveys, et cetera, through the park and rec board. That way it's one less committee, but we can still get people involved. That's how I would look at it. Utilize what we already have as best we can, but still look for public input to do that. That's just my 2 cents. I don't, may not be exactly what you're thinking, James, but I think we're generally thinking the same way on that.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in because I do see it differently. First of all, you know, hats off to Monica and all that she's done in her short tenure as Parks and Recs. I think we would all say she has really built out a really robust offering and taken us not only, you know, through demonstrated awards, but just taken us to a whole new level and allowed us to build true community involvement. So when a member of our staff comes with a thoughtful proposal and says they need help, right? Because Monica just said, you know, they're going to be doing a lot of work. We're not just looking for Parks and Rec people per se. We're looking for people who want to work and produce deliverables to help Monica move this forward and across the finish line. If she can't find them, that will be sad. I mean, you're both right. We are struggling. I have my own theories as to why people are choosing not to raise their hand right now, and it has a lot to do with the way people are treated who do step in to volunteer, and I hope we can improve on collegiality, but that's another theme for another night. So, you know, Monica, if this is something you think is important, then I support you, and I hope that the board will join with me in that. Do any other supervisors want to make a comment? Yeah, John, go ahead.
So in general, I kind of found myself in agreement with Supervisor McCartney and Supervisor Grenier on this. There's also a number of projects that we have in process now that are Park and Rec related that I think we need to kind of work through to bring in and assess how effective we were on those projects. Memorial Park, obviously, we're going out to bid on that. We also have a bike path that is being built around Oxford Valley Road and around the fields. So we have some new stuff that we need to get through the finish line first that I think is a priority. And then thereafter, an assessment of how those projects were, how they fit in a larger framework, what's working, what's not, could certainly be undertaken. But, you know, the Park and Rec Board is very active in this and they could certainly help in that. So that's kind of where I sense my feeling is right now. And, you know, if we could, you know, when we considered the property review committee, there was a draft of, you know, who would be on it, the structure, that kind of stuff as a resolution. So it's certainly something we can consider in the future. I don't necessarily say it's a no for now. It's just, for me, we can push that a little bit.
Suzanne, can I just say something else real quick? You know, listening to what you said and really understanding what Monica's need is for this, the thing that maybe could work, and this is up to you, Monica, is maybe taking those people that you know that have some energy and some passion around, you know, this project and maybe creating a subcommittee under Parks and Recs rather than another committee that reports back to the supervisors. Is that something that would work from a structure standpoint?
That would be something that works. I just know that we really will need people who are willing to volunteer and spend some time, and the Park and Rec Board doesn't necessarily always have that kind of time to dedicate. So
Yeah.
looking for someone with some kind of specific willingness and wantingness to be a participant. I'd be glad to do it that way if that's what the board so chooses. But, you know, I do also want to engage the Board of Supervisors in this process. It's a master plan for the Township Parks and Rec Committee. So overall, so it is important that the Board of Supervisors is involved and engaged too.
Yeah, no doubt. And I appreciate it. You know, I definitely appreciate everything you've done so far since you've been here. It's been amazing work, and you know, want to continue to support that. It's just trying to make sure that the infrastructure and the architecture of it is something that's going to be something that's feasible.
Okay, Fred, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I think I understand what James is going to. And Monica, I mean, I echo everybody else's praise and what you've done in the last 4 years in Park and Rec. You know, where we were then and where we are now, it's a quantum shift. I kind of like the idea of maybe not taking the members of the Park and Rec Board and forming the steering committee, but using them to guide you with maybe members of the sports groups and other interested individuals in the community to work with Park and Rec to finish this needs assessment and then come to the Board of Supervisors. I think that would be a natural evolution of the way, you know, we do process. I mean, I appreciate the board wanting to be involved with a lot of things, but I think in this case, we have wonderful members of the community that are already involved, and you could steer them in a way that we wouldn't need to make a new committee. But, you know, I think the board, from what I'm hearing at least, would probably be very happy for you to augment Park and Rec and maybe use the special events committee, members of the users groups, and come with some kind of recommendation to the board going forward. And I'd be willing to amend my motion if such consensus from my colleagues.
You amended how? I'm sorry, Dr. Weiss. What's the amendment? I was trying to make sure I understood the.
Be to actually probably just to withdraw my motion.
Okay.
And ask that Monica work with the Park and Rec Committee and maybe the Park and Rec Board and the Special Events Board and the user groups to come up with a body that would come to us with recommendations and finishing this needs assessment.
Okay. Well, the person who seconded would have to also agree to withdraw the motion. That would be the chair. That's you, yes.
Yeah, no, I would agree if that's the will of the board. Dan, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
A little more just echoing what Supervisor Weiss just said, really. Um, the natural process that we usually take, right, is to, in Park and Rec matters, is first a group, whether it's the Park and Rec Board or some other special events committee or some other group, I don't want to say subordinate to, but separate from, separate from the Park and Rec Board Park and Rec Board would ultimately review something like this typically and provide a recommendation to us. Whether they do it themselves or someone else provides that information to them, right? So I agree with the motion, or the amended motion and the new motion, I should say. I like that approach. I'm personally fine doing that. I am interested in the timing and the process for how this is going to go. I mean, that's probably not discussion for tonight, actually, but to Supervisor Lewis's point, we have a couple of pretty cool projects that are going to be finished fairly soon that will change or augment what we're doing in Park and Rec very positively, that have the potential to, I don't want, using the word impact, it sounds negative, but it's not, have the potential to impact the needs assessment study in some way, shape, or form once these resources start to get utilized and we start to see what the usership is like and what people want versus don't want, et cetera. So I am a little, I want to make sure long-term that this, whatever study ends up being done, that that information, we're able to incorporate that information into a long-term study, because I think it'll be useful. That doesn't mean I'm against anything that we're setting up right now. It's just something to consider for the future, because I do think the data will be useful moving forward.
So, as a second motion maker, I'm confused because I think everything was withdrawn, but you say you support the motion. So you support the withdrawal, or did I miss a motion?
I thought he withdrew a motion and made a new one, or did you amend it?
No, it was just
He was considering amending it and then decided to withdraw, which was supported by the chair. So as of now.
Oh, so there is no motion.
No motion
okay.
on the floor. That's correct.
All right. So why don't I speed this up? Why don't I make a motion? Or Fred, you can do it if you'd like. But why don't we make a motion to direct Park and Rec staff to work with the Park and Rec Board to establish a steering committee to lead the what do we call it, needs assessment study, the Park and Rec needs assessment study.
Before you make that motion, or before anyone seconds it, I would just, why don't we just put this to the side, let Monica regroup on how she would like to come forward, if that alternate makes sense to her work plan. Because I think, what I heard and what I know to be the case is the volunteers on Parks and Rec are tapped out, busy, doing a lot. Monica needs additional help. And so I'm not sure if that actually gets her to where she needs to be. So Monica, if you're okay with it, if we could, table this, and then we could talk about moving forward in the future.
That sounds great. I can do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Monica,
So I guess I'd be happy to withdraw the motion I just made then.
Okay. I'll send you a message tomorrow as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so we're all good on that. Is there any public comment, Monica, on this?
There is no public comment.
Okay. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Okay, so BOMA.
So at a previous meeting, when we had the discussion of the DEER program, I spoke with not our planner, Jim, but Jim from BOMA, who had pointed out to me that there was one item that we sort of talked about and didn't get resolved, probably accidentally, because we were talking about a lot of different details, and that had to do with 5 Mile Woods. So I've been coordinating with Monica. There was changes made to 5 Mile Woods a number of years ago, where they were hunting every other week. Even according to Monica, people were starting to get confused, like that wanted to use the park, that would go in the wrong week. They weren't sure what the week was. So again, this is just a proposal I'm talking to all of you about, which is I know that we've talked about the problem with deer in the township that I've spoken with Jim about, is the possibility of going back to what was used to be similarly done, which would be to hunting 3 days during the week, never on the weekends, Tuesday through Thursday, from September 22nd to November 25th, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, no weekends. So not Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, where it would be posted, people would be aware. And then after Christmas from December 28th through January 27th. Now, I'm not suggesting that the board wants to sign off on that, but if we were talking about how it's been, what Jim was talking about, as you know, that 5 Mile Woods was an area where they felt that there was a lot of that deer population that they just weren't getting to with the cutbacks, that he was just looking for some clarification if we wanted to bring that back up to what it used to be. Monica's suggestion, dealing with people who go to the park, was when we were going every other week, it was confusing and difficult to keep track of. And that very specific, defined, consistent days would be easier to keep people aware of when those hunting days would take place.
Yes, John.
Would the township manager want a motion to recommend that we allow Boma to hunt at specified days during weekdays and not weekends?
Yeah, so the dates that I had talked to Jim about, and again, this is just he and I talking back and forth of when he thought it would be effective, was those dates that I had given. Every Tuesday through Thursday, 25th, and from December 28th to January 27th.
So I'll make a motion that we authorize the township manager to allow that then.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, James. Any discussion?
Oh.
Yes, Dan.
You made the motion.
Oh, okay. Generally, I'm very supportive of Boma. It's important that we deal with the deer population, which has gotten a little bit out of control lately. And this is a reasonable approach to make sure that the park's available for people when they need it, but also make sure that we can get enough. That's an important area. It's a greenway. It's a place where deer move between Falls and Lower Makefield, and it's a great area to cull the herd, as it were. So that's why I'm very supportive of it.
Thank you, John. Dan?
Yeah, I'm also supportive of it. Kurt, the only kind of corollary I'd add, or kind of nuance to it, I'm just curious, Tuesday to Thursday in those dates, are there any holidays in that time period?
Oh, good question, Dan. When I was looking at my calendar, November 25th is Thanksgiving.
That's yeah.
If you wanted to end it, like, let's say November 24th is the last day. So if people were out playing or, getting out, if it was a mild Thanksgiving, that would afford them that opportunity if they were going to go to the park on Thanksgiving.
Not for nothing, my family and I probably go to 5 Mile Woods on every federal holiday when we're local to go for a hike, and most weekends. So that's the only thing I'd like to add is, John, if you're up for it, to just either shorten the date to avoid Thanksgiving, or just put the stipulation that keep it open during holidays. But I think Thanksgiving is the only one.
Well, I think that would be the only one too. I mean, so you could just change the date through November 24th. Yeah. Let you be out there and add a whole new adventure to your family outing, in the wood now. So.
I did grow up in Maine, so dodged a few.
So, John, did you accept his?
Yes. No, definitely accept for Thanksgiving. So, yep.
Gene, Ms. McCartney, you accept the change as well, the 1 day change?
I do.
Okay, then the motion has been so revised and amended accordingly.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Monica, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as amended, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. And is there any other items under manager's report that we wanted to discuss tonight, Dan?
I'm sorry, my thing muted. That's all I had. Did you ask me if I had anything else? I apologize. That's all I have for my report.
So, yeah, okay. I'm not sure I think this is good for manager's report unless you want it for other business, but we've been speaking with the township manager's been speaking with the folks from Bright Farms. So I would, based off of those discussions, and I know we'll talk about it more here, I would like to make a motion to direct the township manager and the solicitor to terminate the lease with Bright Farms, including but not limited to removal of the building and facilities, removal of existing utility lines, maintenance of the existing stormwater management basin, and restoration of the ground to pre-construction conditions, including any necessary remediation.
I second that.
Sure.
Thank you, John. And then we'll start off with discussion, and I'll start off first. You know, I look forward to the fruits of your labor, Dave and Kurt. I, for one, will be happy to see those buildings removed, and for that portion of our history to be in the history books, as it were. So let's hope that we can get this ironed out and move forward as quickly as possible. Does anybody else want to say anything? Yes, Dan?
Sure. First, just want to echo your comments. I too look forward to getting this over and done with, and removing this facility from this great farmland that we have, and putting it back to what it was. I just want to make sure that as it's being done, that we have oversight so that we can make sure that they are doing what they've committed to, so that at some point when the process is done, it can be brought back to farming if the farmers so choose, and we will be done with the development at the Patterson Farm, and we can move forward in a very positive light. I'm glad we're able to do this a few years earlier than maybe we anticipated before. So that's all I need to say.
James?
Yep. Just want to reiterate what everybody said about Bright House. Just real quick, just to confirm, Dave, the motion that Dan made includes making sure that everything that's part of the lease agreement with them is met at time of, the removal of the building, correct?
Yes, that was the first thing that was
Okay.
part of the motion.
Okay.
And it was couched as including but not limited to, which is of course the favorite phrase of attorneys. So we like that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
So Fred, including you but not limiting you, would you like to add to comments?
I can only think of a malapropism. Light farms. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. John?
No.
Okay,
Call the
thank
question.
you. I think we have to see if there's any public comment.
There is no public comment.
Okay, then with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye, raising your hand.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everyone. Dave, it's your turn. Agenda item number 12, the solicitor's report.
Yes, thank you. Before I get into the specific item there, an executive session was held tonight between 6:45 and approximately 7:20 p.m. All board members were present, along with Mr. Ferguson, Chief Caluzzi, and myself. Issues and items related to real estate, litigation, and information were discussed at the executive session, which concluded at the beginning of the interview for Bette Savanay, who was being considered for the ad hoc committee, property committee. Under the solicitor's report, it's a kind of just a mopping up exercise here. It's consideration to approve a resolution to approve a signed easement agreement for Brookstone Pump Station. Brief history. When Brookstone was built, the developer granted an easement to the township for access to the pump station. In the interim, the developers then sold the interest in that, the entire common area where the easement is located, to the homeowners association. So really, this is just a matter of changing the grantor of the easement from the developer to the HOA or the property owners. It's actually it's in the resolution. Brookstone Condominium Association, just to make sure that that's cleaned up and it will be recorded accordingly once the resolution is passed. So it doesn't change anything else other than it's properly named. And of course, this needs to be done to make sure that all interests are properly recognized in the area. So a motion to approve the resolution would be appropriate.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, John. Any discussion from the board members? Monica, is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Great, motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Next, under the zoning hearing board, there are 3 matters for consideration by the board. I'll try to go through them fairly quickly. Appeal 20-1919. Sherry Leichter as an application for property located at 532 Clarendon Court, tax parcel 20-060-312. She is requesting a variance from the Township Zoning Ordinance 200-22 in order to decrease the rear yard setback to 26 feet 11 inches where 40 feet is required in order to install a new patio cover. We've had a few of these in the past. There are no great adverse implications here. If there's anything with drainage, I'm sure the zoning hearing board will be able to address those and require those as conditions. Therefore, we recommend deferral unless there's a different sentiment from any board members. Hearing none. Second item, appeal number 20-1920, Julia Skolnick is an application for property located at 1072 Gary Drive, tax parcel 20-057-172. She is requesting a variance from the Township Zoning Ordinance 200-6914C to permit the installation of a 6-foot privacy PVC fence over a sewer easement. We've had a few of these in the not too distant past. The zoning hearing board is very vigilant, at least has been, about making sure that any fences that are in any easement, whether it's a sewer easement or storm sewer easement, is accessible by the township, and if necessary, can be removed or will be removed if so required. So unless there's a contrary sentiment, again, we recommend deferral. Hearing nothing, finally, the last appeal is by Brian and Melanie Parker for property located at 24 Highland Drive, tax parcel 20-020-135. They are requesting a variance from the Township Zoning Ordinance 200-23B in order to increase the impervious surface from the existing 26.5% to 31.5%, where 24% is the allowable amount. Also requesting a variance from the Township Zoning Ordinance 200-6914A to allow an existing shed to remain 1 foot from the property line, whereas 10 feet is required. This is with respect to the first variance request, there's a request to be able to build a in-ground pool. I would note on the application that the applicant state that the stormwater system is designed to mitigate all impervious surface over 24%. So assuming that's the case and it would be successful, that would actually be a better result than what currently exists without the pool. As far as the shed is concerned, it appears that that's a situation where a shed was constructed. I don't even know if by the Parkers or somebody else prior to them. And it would just be confirming that a variance should have been requested when the shed was built. And I have not seen or heard any neighboring property owners objecting, although certainly there is a right for public comment if indeed that appears. Given all that, we do recommend deferral to the zoning hearing board, who again is well equipped and has dealt with these issues on a frequent basis. So that'd be our recommendation, unless there's a contrary sentiment by the board. Hearing none, that's all we have for the zoning hearing board appeals.
Suzanne?
Go ahead.
Yes, Ben.
I have one item, if you don't mind. During our May 5th meeting, I believe the board voted to participate in one of the zoning hearing board actions. I believe it was I'm not sure I have this right, but it was appeal number 21-1914 for the 2 McKinley Ave, Joseph Jennings, tax parcel number 20-031-004. I would like to, I'm not sure a motion is appropriate, but I was like to change that from a participation to an opposition this particular appeal. So, so Dave,
Motion
would I
would
have to
be-
make a motion to do
Yeah, I
that?
think a motion would be appropriate in that circumstance, yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to have the Board of Supervisors oppose the zoning hearing board appeal for the Joseph Jennings 2 McKinley Ave, tax parcel number 20-031-004. I believe it's appeal number 21-1914.
A second.
Is there any discussion? Dan, you want to?
Sure. So, since May 5th, I've become aware of several residents in that area that are very strong concerns and feelings about this area. It's a resource, and Dave, you can correct me if I misspeak on any of this, as could Jim. It's a resource protected area, and partially potentially in the floodplain with wetlands, riparian zones, etc. Adjacent to township open space, such that the Mapleville neighborhood, which is adjacent to this, is a low-lying neighborhood, right off of the canal. So there's concerns with flooding there. There's also the Mapleville pump station that's right there. The neighbors are very concerned about this. There have been historic issues at the property, which the township actually purchased a chunk of it, I believe about 3+ acres of it, formerly about a 9 or 10 acre parcel. I think the balance is maybe 6. But there's so many issues with this one in terms of variances and variance requests and other items that I just feel that the board should oppose this particular one.
Any other discussion from the board? Go ahead, James.
I'm just trying to think, Dan, is that more appropriate for those residents to take exception during the actual hearing?
I think it could go either way. I know there's a petition that they're going to send us to oppose. I've seen that. I've seen a draft of it. So they are asking us to oppose formally. And I'm okay listening to them on this one. I think it crosses the threshold where, at least in my opinion, that we would do that. At the same time, some of them plan on going to the zoning hearing board meeting. I'm not sure that all of them understand the process, to be honest with you, with respect to how you participate. I know you and Fred have both been liaisons, so you were on that board, right, James? So I'm not sure that everyone knows exactly what the process is. So they're looking to oppose in any way that they can. So I think several will ask for standing, or at least go to the zoning hearing board and oppose. But I'm willing to put the board's weight behind that too, based on what I've seen and heard from those folks.
So Dan, just, I do have the minutes from that meeting in front of me, and the tax parcel is 20-031-004.
Yep.
Just so we can get that correct, because I know you weren't sure.
Yep.
I guess you're bringing to light that there's additional. I just want to talk about the environmental impact piece of it, for lack of better wording, right? That because of the way the land is situated, the proximity to the canal and other issues, I keep wanting to say wetlands, and I know you don't mean that, but that there's something particular about the parcel of land that is of a significant benefit to the environment, or let's say ecosystem, that you feel those are the reasons that we should be opposing. But and I appreciate that, I truly do, but wouldn't that normally be within the purview of zoning hearing to actually look at those types of issues and make those kind of determinations, because they are an independent entity?
Yeah, and ultimately, absolutely, and ultimately they will, right? But similar to, I'm trying to think of it, similar to a site that might be in a resource protected zone that also is in a floodplain, and they want to build significant amount of, cover in the floodplain. They want to build houses or or patio or something that takes up a bunch of the floodplain. I think that the board has a history of opposing those types of projects versus projects or sites where it's more related to an impervious surface issue where they can address those types of concerns through the typical zoning hearing board approach. I don't mean to lessen what they do, but when it comes to certain resources that are of particular importance to the township, when we have an opportunity to put the board's voice behind it or the weight of the board behind it, I think that helps. It doesn't tell the zoning hearing board what to do per se, but it shows the will and the mindset of the board and the types of policies that we're looking to maintain.
So I guess I'm still struggling because when I look at the original application from those minutes, it doesn't mention any of those things. It just talks about normally you'd need 3 acres and this is just moving to 2 acres. But I don't have the actual application with me, so I can't go to those, deeper source documents. Yes, Fred. Sorry.
So is Jim Majewski on? There he is. Jim, the RRP zone, can you describe that one, please?
Yes, that's the resource protection zone of the township, and we made that a 3-acre minimum lot size zoning district. This property is about 6.3 acres. However, when you net out some of the resources, mainly the woodlands that are on the property, that takes the net lot area down to slightly less, so that to add the 1 additional lot that they're proposing behind where the existing house goes, you're under the threshold of what the minimum net lot size is. It will exceed the 3-acre minimum for that zone, but due to the net lot area, it will be slightly under. As far as floodplain, the floodplain just barely touches the east end of the property and down along the canal, where near where the bridge crosses the canal and the 3-acre open space parcel that we had purchased back in 2016. So here's where the property is outlined in the orange. It's on the border of Yardley Borough. There's McKinley Avenue is the road where my cursor is. Taylorsville Road goes to the north, and that's where the property is situated.
You're muted.
I could go, Fred.
So Jim, you mentioned net lot size being under the 3 acres. Is that what the IPC stipulates, net lot size, or is it just lot size?
Our ordinance talks about net lot size for the purposes of how many lots you can get out of a property. However, the gross lot size for each of the lots, I believe, will be greater than 3 acres.
So on a technical basis, they don't meet the requirements of subdivision.
That is correct. And that's why they need the variance, because they exceed the density of the property due to the fact that they have the resources on the property.
Have we had such an example previously to this, Jim, in the protected district?
I don't recall.
Any more?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm sorry, Suzanne, just the technical aspect I can understand, but I don't know if that's enough. I mean, we are participating, and I'm sure Barbara can bring this up, but I don't know if that alone is enough to oppose the zoning variance. Just saying,
Yes, John, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, in general, I'm comfortable with opposition. I think for folks to understand, the zoning hearing board is, as you mentioned, Chair Bundy, a totally independent quasi judiciary entity, makes decisions on its own, has made decisions against the township in times past. So I just see this as making sure we get an effective, more aggressive representation on this particular one. I don't see it as a inherent risk, but that's my perspective.
Anybody else want any additional comments? Monica, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Okay, so with that, call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand and saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Yeah. Okay, so the motion carries 3-2 with James, Dan, and John in the affirmative, myself and Fred in opposition. So we will join, we will oppose at the zoning hearing board. So thank you
I'll
all.
advise my office about that at the appropriate time.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everyone.
Sure.
Okay.
Jim, do you want this one? The next one? Looks like-
Agenda item number 14.
Yes.
And I understand that the applicant, I guess I should say, I don't know if that's the official term in this setting, but I do know that Mr. Miller has joined the meeting. So is it appropriate to bring him in at this point, or how does that work?
Yes. And if I may, I can just give you a brief introduction of the site. I'll share my screen where you can see where everything's located. The property in question is located on Langhorne Yardley Road, right near Mirror Lake Road. And the property parcel size is about 4.8 acres. It's currently, there are two parcels owned by Mr. Miller. There's the property that is approximately 1.5 acres in size. That's on the western end. That is currently vacant. And then there's another parcel that is currently 3.3 acres. That's the area, the current lot line is in the red dotted line. And that contains the existing dwelling, carriage house, a garage, and a spring house that was restored. The property is in the Edgewood Village Historic District, and the property actually is known as the Jesse Palmer Tavern or Old Shade. And I don't know why Yahoo's popping up on my screen. Let me try that again. The house was built in 1765. And I don't know, hold on one second. Okay. And basically what the applicant is proposing to do is they're proposing to take the existing lot line between the two parcels owned by Mr. Miller, move it over approximately 100 feet, which will be coincident with a prior subdivision line on the property. There's actually a monument on Langhorne Yardley Road and an existing monument in the rear of the property adjoining the Patterson Farm, which adjoins the property to the north. And that will create new parcels that'll be 2.4 acres and 2.46 acres. So the parcel will be roughly the same size in site. And Mr. Miller would like to take it from there. It should note that the township engineer had reviewed the application, provided a letter at the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission unanimously voted to recommend approval of the subdivision, or not subdivision, it's a lot line change, subject to compliance with the comments that were made by or the responses made by the review engineer or design engineer for the applicant. And that's what we have. And I'll bring up the plans so you can see what that looks like. Here's the existing plan. The lot line is over on the west side of the property and is shifting over 100 feet to match where the two monuments are and be near the existing garage.
So for discussion purposes, it would be appropriate to have a motion to approve the lot line change as described by Mr. Majewski.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the lot line change as described by Mr. Majewski.
Okay, Fred, I saw your hand, but John beat you to the punch. So if you would please be the second. Thank you. Okay. So with that being said, I'll open it to discussion. John, I see you're still open mic, so would you like to lead off? No, you've closed mic. James, it's to you.
Jim, this is the property directly across the street from CVS, correct?
Correct.
Is there a intent of the owner to do something down the road with this lot line change, or?
I can speak to that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm David Miller. Lived there over 50 years with my family, 2 sons and wife. And we're at the age now where the property is too large for us to manage anymore. So it's a 5-acre property. We got advice from various sources that if we had that lot line changed, equating it to roughly 2.5 acres each parcel, it might be easier to sell it. All of the buildings are on the eastern half of the land. The western half of the land is undeveloped. So that if someone wanted to buy just the house and the rest of the property around it, and if someone else wanted to buy the open land, or if somebody wanted to buy the whole thing, that it would be easier for us to market. So we have no intention at this point to do anything other than put it up for sale, although there are alternatives that we have talked about doing, but they're not foremost in our plans.
And thank you, Mr. Miller. And Jim, real quick, just looking at what that new configuration is going to be, is there a feasible building envelope within that new lot line change?
Yes, it actually makes the vacant lot slightly larger. So now it's 2.46 acres in size, and it's a suitable size to build one or more additional dwellings.
So even with the setbacks of the side requirements, because it looks like it's pretty narrow. I'm looking at it. It looks like if you want to bring it back up. I'm just looking at the public record. I'm not looking at what you had up.
Hold on a second.
Mr. Miller, while we're waiting for that, I just want to say I love your daffodils in the springtime.
My wife is right here off camera, and those are the flower beds were her job for 50 years. Cutting the grass was my job, but then I got help from our sons, and now we have 9 grandchildren helping also. But the flowers are her responsibility, and you're one of many people that commented about what she has done there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if you look at the aerial photo, you can see the adjoining subdivision. And if you look at the width of several of these lots versus the width of the new lot, which is now larger than it was before, you could fit several homes in there, maybe 3 or 4 homes along that frontage, or do something else with the property since it is zoned historic commercial and it's, I believe, within the traditional neighborhood overlay district. You could put some mixed use commercial type item in there, although you would have to respect all the natural resources There is a small stream that runs to the property, discharges from the detention basin across the street, runs through. There are woodlands on the property. Since there's no current construction proposed, they haven't shown what they intend to preserve of that because they don't have any kind of development plan, but they will be required to preserve most of the woodlands on the site should they choose to develop.
Okay, and just real quick again, the parcel directly to the west of that, that's owned by somebody else. That looks like it's owned by Kramer, so that's not part of this deal, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
there was a house on that adjoining lot at one time, but I believe it burned down about 10 to 15 years ago.
Okay, and then going back to the lot line change proposal, the existing lot is the dotted one, the proposal is the orange one. Right next to the orange one is a small building, it looks like. What is that?
It's a carriage house. It's built approximately in the early 1800s. And we do have drawings, engineered drawings for that line. And it does meet the setback requirements for an outbuilding. It's not a house that has one dimension. It's an outbuilding that has less of a dimension.
But it meets, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, it meets the current setback requirements where the current lot line is, but where that proposed lot line, and it puts it right up against it, where if you end up subdividing that parcel to the west of yours, I don't know if that building now meets that setback requirement.
It does meet that setback requirement.
So it meets a side yard setback requirement?
Yes, that's not a principal building, that is an accessory building. And within that district, the accessory building setback is 5 feet. Here they have approximately 10.
Okay, yeah, it looked like it was right on top of it. Okay. All right, that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Dan?
Oh, yeah. Jim got rid of my plans, my drawings. Hello again, Mr. Miller.
You moved from the planning commission, I see.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I'm just the liaison of the planning commission. Sometimes they let me speak. No. So yeah, Mr. Miller came before the planning commission, and I got him with all kinds of questions, so I won't bug him here. But Jim, you hit on the one thing that I want to make sure the board was aware of, just generally the zone that we're in. And James, you were going down the line of questioning that I was hoping you would, just so folks would understand the potential for development on what will be the vacant lot with respect to the woodlands and the building envelope there. It'll be interesting. I know the HARB, which I'm also a liaison to, is very much in favor of this as well. They think it opens up that area to become a little bit more of a village, ever so slightly more, if they are able to do some sort of mixed use on that newly vacant lot. In terms of the existing home and outbuildings, Jim, with respect to the overlay district, that both lots would be in the overlay district, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if anyone wanted to, if Mr. Miller and his family had decided to sell both parcels and move, I believe his home is historic. They'd have to, not they, the new owner would have to accommodate the overlay district guidelines. Is that correct?
Yes, since this is in the Edgewood Village Historic District, any buildings or any structures that are either built or modified on this property or any of the adjoining properties would be required to go in front of our Historical Architectural Review Board for their recommendation and approval by the Board of Supervisors of a certificate of appropriateness.
Okay. And then I know we didn't label some of the resource protection setbacks and all that because it's a lot line change, but we do have a stream buffer on here, which is part of our ordinance. Because it's on a plan that's signed and sealed that would be recorded, I believe, I just wanted to point out that in looking at the response to the engineer, Remington Vernick's letter, it looks like the stream line that they have on here is the top of water or bottom of bank versus the top of bank, which is where we would typically have that buffer start from the top of bank 50 feet out versus the somewhere in the stream itself. So I assume, Jim, that once we, assuming we move forward with some sort of land development, that line with the buffer would be revised to reflect our ordinance versus what is on this plan. Is that correct?
Actually, Remington Vernick will have them revise this plan to more accurately depict the stream in the top of bank and slightly adjust that 50-foot buffer so it's coincident with the top of bank of the stream.
Okay, but they're not going to have them do the woodlands buffers, I don't think they did a wetlands delineation, any of that stuff for purposes of a lot line. They'd have to do that for any future land development, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's I have no issues with this, Mr. Miller. Thank you for coming and answering questions yet again.
And one thing I throw in, this is a suggestion I made several times. If you start at the western end of the Kramer property and you go up to the intersection of Edgewood Road, all of that woods is part of the Patterson Farm. Unfortunately, much of the wooded land, both our land and that part of the farm, the trees are just deteriorating, falling down, whatever. My idea was to make the village whole was if the road frontage of that wooded area could be sold off for housing development, housing meaning a village kind of housing. It would make it whole from Mirror Lake Road intersection all the way up to the I-95 overpass. I'm just throwing that in now. I know the hard board has been aware of my ideas, but it's something that someone else might feel is worthy.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other discussion or questions for Mr. Miller from the board? Monica, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
And with that, call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Any opposition? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
Thank you. And could I just ask now, what Jim said something about Vernick was going to require me to do something or not?
Actually, your engineer is going to finish revising the plans, resubmit it for review, and then Remington Vernick will verify that they've complied with all the conditions of approval.
Okay. And my engineer has been notified of this? Or
yes, I spoke with your engineer today.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for your help on that. And thank everybody on the board.
Thank you. Have a good night. Okay. Agenda item number 15, public comment. Monica, is there any public comment?
There is. Lee is on the line. Oh, I'm sorry. I believe someone else moved in. Oh. Things are getting moved around on me. I apologize.
It's okay.
I really have nothing to say, but
Lee is on the line. There we go.
You got me.
Yeah, we do, Lee. Can you state your full name and address, sir?
Yeah. I wasn't going to say anything. 247 Truman Way, Yardley. Just quick, just a typo on the agenda, 13C. Shouldn't that be appeal number 20-1921? You see, I have nothing to say, just a typo.
Counselor? 20, it reads 201 dash, and should be just 20-1921 is what?
Yes, number C you're talking about. Yes, it would appear that would be 20-1921. Yes, the minutes should reflect that correction. Thank you.
And actually,
I think I read it as
one.
I think I read it as 20-1921, but I must have omitted the one. So yes, correct.
And actually, all three of those should be
21.
21.
See, all should be 21 dash. Yes, I just saw that too.
So
Yeah,
a correction
good for
on
something.
correction. Thank you both.
All right. Everybody having a thanks, Chair Blondie. Everyone stay well and oh, listen, when is there going to be a face-to-face board meeting?
We'll let you know.
Okay. Stay
Thank you,
well.
Lee.
Take care.
Okay. Good night. Who's next, Monica?
The next caller is Joe.
Okay.
Hello?
Hi, Joe. Can you state your full name and your address for the record, please?
Yes. Hi, Joe Chenard, 1667 Dover Road. Good evening, Ms. Blondie. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. First of all, I would like to personally thank Mr. Ferguson for all his hard work and getting all my issues resolved. It is deeply appreciated. I would also like to thank Mr. Pokel and Mr. Majewski for all their hard work on my behalf. It is also deeply appreciated. I would like to tell the board that you were very lucky to have these three gentlemen on your staff. In my opinion, they are all major assets to the township and to the community. And before I forget, I would also like to thank Mr. Hucklebridge and Chris from Public Works for coming up to my property on Friday and getting my pump started.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Go ahead, Kurt.
No, listen, as I said to Joe, flushing your toilet should not have to be. We're happy that we could help them get that done. We had some staff that went over to get the pump wrapped up, and now we'll work with him to sit on the developer to have the landscaper go out, which they're scheduled to do, to hopefully fix his yard in one fell.
Well, that's great. And like I said, I appreciate everything you did and everything Jim did and Andy did. And, there was a little venting on my part, but, I waited so long, with an answer, and, once you got involved, Mr. Ferguson, it got done. So, like I said, I want to really thank you.
You. And your persistence is what makes you charming.
All righty. Well, you guys all have a nice night, okay?
You too, Joe. Thank you for calling.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The next
Monica's ready.
I'm sorry, Suzanne. The next person on the line is Lisa.
Great. Thank you. Lisa, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Hi, Lisa. Yep, I hear you now. Can you state your full name and address for the record, please?
Yes, it's Lisa Tenney, 156 Pinnacle Circle, Yardley. I'd like to encourage Chair Blondie to not change the existing LMT tree ordinance. Changing the tree replacement from native to allowing ornamental trees would have a negative environmental impact. Ornamental trees, according to the proceedings of the National Academy of Science, states that non-native woody plants reduce insect populations and in turn impact the breeding success of insectivorous birds. For example, more than 20 different caterpillar species, 534 species of moths and butterflies prefer oaks, white cherry, maple, and willow trees when compared to both the number and diversity of insects found on non-native trees. Insectivore migrating and omnivore bird species such as chickadees require certain insects during certain months to have breeding success. It's been stated in a Sierra Club 2018 publication by Jason Daly, ornamental tree leaves contain chemicals that cannot sustain insects. They can flower at different times, and some fruits may be toxic to native songbirds and migrating birds compared to native trees. So that's the facts. On a different topic, I recommend perhaps instead of another committee, maybe providing to the residents of LMT an open community focus group to have community input onto the input of Parks and Rec future programming. I'm concerned about the bow hunting at 5 Mile Woods. I know a lot of people visit there even during the weekdays. And I'm sure you all know there was a incident where someone was killed by a hunter mistakenly. I think it was Lake Noxamixon. It was a nice young man. So I want to know what efforts you're going to use to mitigate such an accident on preserved lands. Thank you. Just addressing some of my concerns.
Thank you for calling, Lisa.
Thank you.
I would briefly, because we have had a presentation on BOMA, and we've been using BOMA for a number of years, and they have hunted in 5 Mile Woods for a number of years, and we do have precautions put in, and when hunting is in effect, the park is closed, like literally, figuratively, the fence is shut, and we do communicate hunting, and we do post about hunting. So your point is well taken, and we all appreciate the seriousness of that. And, hopefully we'll have another safe and successful hunt. I have all faith that we will. Is there any other further public comment, Monica?
There is no further public comment.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so agenda item number 16, discussion items. Mid-year fee adjustment consideration. Jim, are you still around? Yep, there you go.
I almost left and then I remembered that I had one more thing. Yes, in discussions with our Environmental Advisory Council, we found out that we actually should have been adjusting our tree bank replacement fee over the last several years since it was adopted in 2014. The ordinance calls for an adjustment every 3 years based on a consumer price index, and we have not done that. However, we'd like to get that adjustment made and do that now since we're basically 4 years behind where we should be on that, and raise the fee from $315 to $347, which is the amount calculated based on the consumer price index.
Are there any, go ahead.
We also have a couple of other fees that we're looking at. With our new building code official in place, they've been going through and helping to fee out projects as they do it. And they've noted a couple of minor fee adjustments that probably should be made to our electrical fees. And we'd like to take care of that now as we go forward through the remainder of the year. And then we can do a more comprehensive review of our fees at the end of the year for the board for the 2022 fee schedule. But for right now, we're looking at revising a couple of those fees. We don't have that quite worked out yet, but we would bring that back to the board for what we recommend on that. And then one other fee is an adjustment to the zoning hearing board application fee. We currently have it split into two parts, an application fee and then an escrow fee. And the more we think about it with the accounting that we do and the amount of effort involved in doing that. It would probably be easier if we just make it a flat fee. No change in the fee, just making it a flat fee. So instead of giving some people a $30 refund and making other people pay $50, we would just keep it a set amount for everyone.
Okay. And you'll have the recommended fee adjustments for the board and public to review for the July 21st meeting. Is that the goal?
Yes.
Okay. Do any supervisors have any questions or discussion? This is a discussion item.
I'm generally supportive of this and keeping our fees in line with the costs associated to administer the service is important. And so I'm hopeful that we can get everything on a track where it can be part of the annual fee schedule so we make sure we cover all of these. So I'm very supportive of that and look forward to seeing the final resolution when it comes forward. So thank you for your work on this, Jim.
Anybody else? Okay, Monica, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
And I guess I'll take a turn and then talking a lot tonight. I guess I should apologize, but the EAC had brought to me the issue of the tree fee, as I know it's been discussed in the past. So I'm happy to move forward on that. And I do think, and it's been talked about at the EAC, right? We've been collecting money. We have that money in a dedicated account for when developers pay the fee in lieu of. And Kurt, would you mind, I know there has been some talk in the past about where we stand with that and the account itself. So can you tee that up a little bit?
Sure. So you are right. Back after I first started here, we reconciled and got straightened out all of our funds to keep better track of where we were. We did that obviously with the tree bank fund as well. As of today, there's about $98,000 in that account. We have spoken with EAC, with a couple of those members about doing some targeted plantings based upon the tree planting plan that we have. And so there's certainly money in there to do that. Part of that effort over the last couple of years as well was to go back and to require developers that owed the township either trees or money. And one of those included Bright Farms, as you all know, we required them to pay those things. So in the last couple of years, we've collected a little over $10,000 in outstanding fees from previous projects. So we don't have any of those left. And we have, in the last couple of years on past due projects, have had 184 of trees planted that were due to us that had not been done. So I think at this point, we have memorialized where all of the trees are. And, and as I've said to members of the EAC, going forward, we really want to make sure we have those tree requirements and fees memorialized in development agreements so we can hold them specifically accountable to doing that. And in the past, sometimes that hadn't been done and it had become more problematic. So that's where we are, at least as far as the fund and the bank and the delinquencies. And I want to thank Jim too. We've worked real hard to get these accounts cleared up and to make these developers fulfill their responsibilities in the township.
Great.
I can keep talking if you want me to. So
No. I think we've talked about trees and fees enough for now. If there's no further supervisor comment and there's no public comment, I think we can move on to the next agenda item. Right, Monica, no public comment?
Yeah, there's no public comment.
Okay, so then 17 is supervisor reports, and oh, look, it's me. So more about the EAC. We've been talking about trees. We've been talking about planting trees, right? When I was the liaison in 2019, the EAC undertook as a volunteer project. We have a rock star member of the EAC. They're all rock stars, but one individual, particularly the chair, used her expertise to help come up with planting projects around the township. And we did one at Stoddard baseball field. Last year, they did one at Patterson Farm to help protect erosion around the stream. They have more plantings that they're working on for the fall. So we have been talking a lot about the tree bank and the tree ordinances. So and if anyone's had a chance to look at the meeting that we had the other days, we did discuss a lot of different things. So one of them is that ultimately, I will be working on and coming to the board and asking for their support in fine tuning that language, right? Because we have a certain caliber of plant tree that has to be planted, and they're large, and large trees don't always do well. And so maybe making further allowances for different size trees is appropriate. Native species are an important part of the ecosystem, but interestingly enough, that language isn't in the tree ordinance. It's only in the street tree section, which is a totally different standalone ordinance. So making sure that all makes sense. And yes, I personally am in favor of the ability to plant some trees that are outside of the native species ordinance. And I will be asking the other supervisors to consider that. But certainly, I would never recommend shifting the preponderance away from native species, but only allowing for some options. But that is the sum and substance of what we were talking about. Looking forward to Community Day, where the EAC will have a table, and hopefully we'll be collecting wine corks again. Very successful last month, so probably a continuing initiative. And that is all I have. Thank you. James?
I have nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Fred?
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. John?
So the Citizens Traffic Commission met on Monday. They elected a new interim chair, Art Cohn, and they canceled their July meeting, although they received shortly thereafter that there's a particular property development that they need to review. So they're going to work through that, and they've scheduled an August meeting. The Trenton Mercer Airport Review Board met last week to review follow-up from the June 2nd hearings that were held on the Trenton Mercer expansion. And they also were asking about our letter, which I believe went out yesterday, correct? Our comment letter?
Yeah, I think
just like the email that is, yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, Monday or Tuesday.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all I have.
Dan?
Yeah, I'll be brief. We already talked about the Planning Commission meeting with Mr. Miller here. Otherwise, the Electricity Reliability Committee will meet next on July 8th, Planning Commission on July 12th, and the Historical Commission on July 14th. I don't have the HARB's next meeting date in front of me, but I'm sure they're looking to meet soon. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Okay, under agenda item number 18, other business. In keeping with most of the history of the township, not always, we will be canceling the July 7th meeting of the Board of Supervisors and only meeting once that month. So hope people get to take a day away someplace as the country starts opening up. Is there any discussion of that from any of the supervisors or any public comment, Monica?
There is no public comment.
Okay. So then agenda item 19, appointment.
Suzanne, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
I just want to discuss something we were speaking about now that the township building is open. and the community center is open, and we're all talking about the possibility of returning to a more normal type of meeting, transitioning to live meetings and maybe hybrid meetings. We're going to need some technological equipment to keep us up with the times. So I think this is a good time to make a motion to authorize the purchase of the necessary equipment to accommodate future hybrid meetings with Delaro Corporation at a cost of $18,102.23.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, James. Okay, is there any discussion? Yes,
very
Dan?
quickly. Yeah, sorry. And this may be probably a question for you, Kurt. Can you briefly describe what a hybrid meeting is, and at the same time we're spending $18,000 for it, but I believe that could be covered by grant funding, so that it may not be even that much of a cost to the township. Can you describe that for everyone that's watching at home that may not be familiar?
Sorry. So first off, the equipment upgrades that we need go beyond just having hybrid meetings. We, if people watch these, or when we were live, or when we were in the building, all of our cameras are standard definition. The audio is antiquated, and a lot of times it's when you hear the feedback. So we have a price tag to replace all of that stuff. That would be part of what's called a PEG grant, which stands for essentially Public Education and Government Channel, that the franchise agreement, being Verizon and Comcast, would pay for. Comcast negotiations are well underway. We're part of almost a 50 community consortium negotiating the Verizon agreement that I won't go into the details now, but that has drug on for quite some time. The quote that you just read is the quote that we would need to upgrade the equipment that we would have to accommodate those hybrid meetings. It wouldn't be to swap out the cameras and stuff that, eventually we'll do. The hybrid meetings, though, I think, frankly, I know that several supervisors have asked about this, is going to be, I think, what a lot of towns will do moving forward, which will essentially allow for the opportunity to have the public and supervisors still come to the township building and participate. But those people at home that maybe they can't come to the meeting, that whatever it is, that they could still participate remotely. And the technicians that we would have would be able to pull people in to the meeting via Zoom, and people sitting at the meeting would see them, and vice versa. So if you were sitting at home, you'd see people at the dais, and as we spoke, it would pop up just like it did before, and like this. It would be, it would allow for what I think is convenient public participation even after the pandemic is over. So this will allow us to get the equipment and the software that we need to facilitate that interaction.
Thanks, Kurt. I think that's helpful. And I think one of the additional benefits of that is folks that are at home that couldn't make it into a meeting to make public comment, whether they're, infirmed or something, or unable to drive here or walk here or whatever it may be, can now participate more fully in public meetings once we go physically to, in the same space back to kind of the way it was. So I think this only serves to increase public involvement in the board meetings, increase transparency, increase everything that we're looking to do. So I'm in favor of this, especially since we have grants surrounding it that can help it. So I fully in favor of this. But thanks for the description.
And Dan, for supervisors, like if you travel around doing work a lot, in the event you are out of town on a meeting day, and instead of sitting and saying I'm going to try to call in and figure out, you could do this and not miss a meeting because you're.
I schedule all of my travel around Board of Supervisors meetings. I do not like being out of town, but I appreciate that though.
Thanks.
Is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Then with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, agenda item 19, appointments to board and commissions. Is there a motion? Yes, Fred?
I make a motion to appoint Bet Sauvigny to the Ad hoc Property Committee.
Second.
Thank you, John. Beat you to it, James. Got to be quicker. Is there any discussion?
Real quick, Suzanne, she applied to be one of the at-large members, right? If I remember from her cover letter.
I don't remember that.
Okay, I'm mentally trying to connect the dots between their membership and what they've applied for. That's all.
Yeah, so I would say that, as we get more members, then, we'll have to figure out where people fit. And if there comes a point where somebody who applies and there's no space for them, then we'll have to figure out how to handle that. So with that, we'll call the question on the appointment. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay. Motion carries 5-0. And with that, citizens of Lower Makefield, you have heard tonight that we have a lot of opportunities and need for volunteers, and this committee is just one of them. The goal, is to have as many people at the table as we can have with the appropriate skill set to get this moving forward. That being said, because it does have a tight time frame, we do now have a quorum with 4 members, so we can begin meetings, but please volunteer for this or any of the other openings that we have. We need your help to continue to make Lower Makefield a great place to live. So because this committee has a big task ahead of it and a short time frame to get it moving, I'm going to ask James and Fred if you would please both be liaisons, alternating however it seems to work, so that we can get this up and going. And if one of you isn't available, then hopefully the other will be. So thank you for your help with that. And I'm going to move on to adjournment 20 before either of you can respond. And saying that since there is no further business before the board, I bid you all a good night, and thank you all for your help.
Good night, y'all.
Good night, everybody. Good night.